Russia was the Union of Soviet Social Republics. And they'd say, oh, but aren't you so glad that you're in America? I said, well, I know a lot of Russian filmmakers, and they have a lot more freedom than I have. All they have to do is be careful about criticizing the government.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to PopLife, a new TIR Presents show, or newer TIR Presents show, where we take a more deep dive, fun dive, into different aspects of pop culture, movies, and something I've done and still do, kind of more for fun. For years, music. And today we're going to be having another music talk. We've been having these music talks lately, and they've been a lot of fun. This was supposed to happen last week, but sadly I wasn't able to do it as I had to cross the border and I wasn't going to come back in time. So I'm back. I'm with my very good friend who, wherever you're watching the show or listening to the show later, there's links in the description to his social media and also his very successful podcast that he has been doing for about 10 years, if not more than 10 years. He will say at some point that he's been doing it longer than me. He will try to be better than me. I will at one point take myself off air just so he can filibuster. I'm just teasing. I'm totally teasing. I can see him in the virtual green room shaking his head. This is my very good friend, someone I have been blessed to share a stage with, my good friend Conan Neutron of Conan Neutron and the Secret Friends.
Yeah, absolutely.
I do want to say before we even get into this conversation, two things. One thing, Conan has an interview with a band that I think maybe I might like a little bit more than him, but I think we can both agree that we probably both stopped listening to them as hard as we did in like 90. So Conan,
everyone agrees that Angel of Death and Raining Blood is amazing. Like that's there's no doubt anyone's
Seasons in the Abyss.
Seasons of the Abyss, killer. And then there's like it's sort of like, hey, when Metallica puts out a new record too, hey, good for them. I don't have to listen to it.
I don't. Yeah, people. So me and Ben Burgess, he's been gone for the last week or so, and we had made this idea. We wanted to do this while you were here. I did, at least, and we didn't have time. Wanted to just have breakfast in Ensenada, which is about an hour south of us.
Sure,
it's a bigger city. We just never get to go there, and it's one of the most beautiful drives that I've made in North America. And I say that with the utmost confidence that driving down the coastal route of I think it's Mexico Highway 1 in Baja is all the way down to Cabo. There's nothing more gorgeous. Just the further south you go.
It's a nice drive. Yeah.
It's nice. Yeah. You get out and you just cry and you're like, God made this.
Look, man, it's no Nebraska. That's all I gotta say.
I was trying to kill the LaFen page, and I don't know how to kill a page on Facebook. I'm just like, it doesn't need to be around anymore. And I'm looking at these pictures, like taking pictures at the Nebraska sign. Like, God, I don't miss that.
We were, Tony and I were, we were trying to figure out what the worst state was in the last tour. Like, it was like a road game of like, what's the worst state? And there's all these rules, like, if it has, this is Tony's rule. If it has a beach, it's not the worst state. And I'm like,
that's fair.
And
that's
I'm like,
very fair.
But Florida was my answer to that. But Yeah, there's a lot of criteria, but peace and love in my heart to any Nebraska listeners out there. My vote was Nebraska.
Well, you know who's a fan of the show who I got to meet in real life in New York is he calls the Majority Report quite a bit. The Kowalski in Nebraska.
Oh yeah. I met him when I
We
hosted.
all hung out at the bar afterwards.
Yeah. I met him when I hosted that show. In New
You
York.
met him. I forgot.
People were like, who's this guy with the loud jacket? What's his name?
Very, very.
I don't know, but
nice.
I got a mic and you don't, son. That's all I know. Also, real quick, you didn't actually mention what the episode was. It was Dave Lombardo of Slayer.
I was getting to that.
Okay, all right.
See?
Well,
Did I not tell you people that he was gonna fucking?
It's hard to turn my host brain off. I'm sorry, but
That's fine.
Yeah.
Look, I know who you are. I know what I'm getting into.
I know you do, but your audience doesn't. Clearly.
Hey, you've been on this show enough. Anyway,
Have I?
Burgess and I are driving down to Ensenada, and as we're driving down, I was like, "Let's listen to this Metallica record."
This new one, the one that just came
new
out with the burned crib artwork or whatever.
Yeah, which is weird.
Yeah.
Like
Very odd.
you can tell when those MFs are going to rehab. Like, but anyway,
Fair.
it's not. Burgess had coincidentally a Master of Puppets shirt on.
Yeah, it's not to sidebar your sidebar, which I'm definitely going to do. The two people that sort of surprised me as secret metalheads from this space, this world, is him and Matthew Film Guy. Matthew Film Guy.
Yeah. Yes.
Which I forgot that I know him through Jason Pace of Kowloon Walled City, formerly of Kowloon Walled City.
Whoa.
And I totally forgot that. I'm like, of course you like mess with metal, man. That makes sense.
That's serious, posty metal. But yeah, so we're listening to it and we're like, Burgess goes, it's not that bad,
Right.
It you know what it is? It's a bunch of 50-some-year-old dudes that are
whatever.
playing metal. That's what it is.
They're having a good time.
They're having a good time. Yeah.
It's fine.
I wasn't.
I ain't mad at it. Whatever.
It was what it was. I'm not going to sit here and write 3,000 words on why I think they should go kill themselves.
Look, wow. Yeah, I'm not mad at it, and I'm not going to listen to it either. Good for them. They've got there's like a Metallica industry, right? There's people that like whose families like depend on Metallica being a band. And that's one of the reasons why I'll never forget. I watched Some Kind of Monster, which is as good of a if you're into that kind of thing, it's up there with This Is Spinal Tap as far as like hilarity. But as watching,
I got misty-eyed at the Dave Mustaine scene. That shit made me really
Oh
sad.
yeah, I just missed my little Danish bro or whatever he says.
Oh my god,
so great. But I saw this with John Congleton, who now has won many Grammys. Saint Vincent. He did a Bono record, I think. He works with all these people that your audience would know. Anyway, he was just like, yeah, I just wanted to get up and stare at this and yell at the screen, just break up. I was like, yeah, that's fair. That's fair, man.
But so Conan interviewed Dave Lombardo of Slayer, which is really cool. It shouldn't say of Slayer. Dave Lombardo for
of
me,
a lot of bands, but most
has
famous
played in a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Did he just play in the new version of Mr. Bungle too?
He sure is. Yeah, the thrash version of Mr. Bungle.
The thrash version of Mr. Bungle to me is like a dream come true. It's like Scotty Ian.
Let me tell you, having had Trace Bruance and Trevor Dunn on the show, it's a dream come true for them too.
Dude,
they are so excited because that's how they started.
Everything I've heard from that, and I haven't listened to the record. I just would see the stuff they post on Instagram and stuff. Pretty dope.
Yeah, there's a song called "A Racist" that's pretty that's probably my favorite one of those.
But isn't this old songs that they wrote back in the 80s?
No. It's all new stuff. But they started as a thrash band. Yeah. And then they were seeing Anthrax and they were seeing Slayer or whatever. So yeah, to have Scott Ian of Anthrax, to have Dave Lombardo of Slayer in the band. Those dudes are as stoked as the people that are stoked in the audience, So we as coming back up from Ensenada, we started bumping some playlist Spotify made that was filled with 80s, thrash bands and metal bands. So it was if I had feathered hair and an IROC-A-Z with T-top, it would have been a freaking dream come true. Sure, yeah, absolutely.
But let's get into let's get into why we're talking, what we're here for, which is grunge. And I'm gonna post.
I was just gonna say, and there was a comment on the YouTube version of that Dave Lombardo episode that was, "This is the best interview with a metal musician I've ever heard." And like, I'm thinking, yeah, too bad I don't interview many metal musicians. and then the second thing I thought of is, I guess the bar's pretty low.
I'm gonna tell. Well, I don't want to say it on air now, but I feel like I should tease it a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But in going back to the Bay Area,
yeah.
Did you ever meet Greg Day, who fixes guitars for everybody, or were you gone by then?
I don't think I've met him. No.
I think you were gone by then.
Okay.
Greg
maybe.
fixes guitars for everybody. He's a luthier, and Greg just got this new property, and he's been holding my guitars, Conan, for 3 years.
Okay, well, they got to be somewhere, right? So that makes sense.
And so I got my guitars back as I went up north to a funeral, and we're talking about doing some live podcast stuff with some of these metal people, me and Burgess.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to name any names right now, but trying to have a small select studio audience for this. But we're talking like some of the bigger names in the Bay Area thrash, because you know the Soundwave community that I'm tied to, and you're tied to as well. Sometimes
I forget that is the case, but it's 100% true. Yeah.
So
like, oh, yeah, I know them.
I'm pretty excited for what we're going to be doing up there, and we haven't decided the dates yet, but it's coming, and we're going to be streaming some of this as well too. That's exciting. If you want in on this kind of, but I know it's harder for you because you decided to move to kind of another place I don't think is my favorite place to go in America.
AKA most of the Midwest. Hey, look, Milwaukee is had a socialist mayor, like strong labor bastion. You could do a lot worse than Milwaukee, but I get it.
A black socialist mayor, right?
Yeah.
That's why Conan moved to Milwaukee, because he looked at me. He's like, Jason, when I leave,
where's the socialist mayor at? Not anymore. That was like way before either of our lifetime. But I tell you what, cost of living versus Bay Area cost of living, that's nice.
Hey, there's a reason why neither one of us are back in Oakland.
Right? We didn't leave because we hated it.
Yeah, it wasn't because we're like, oh man, F this place and its culture.
No. It's more like F this not being able to literally do anything ever because you are just like, trying to stay afloat. But anyway, yeah, that's.
Well, speaking of punk, so let's first. I'll give you my take on this.
Sure. Yeah, lay it on me.
So before we, I was thinking of several titles for the show, and this was the only one I thought that was a little click worthy. I won't lie, but I don't know if we really want to get into what killed it, because I don't know if it's technically dead, because I don't believe grunge is a genre. And first things first, I think Conan and I are of the same mind that we don't look at it as a genre. And I look at grunge music as an outgrowth of the hardcore scene that evolved in the Americas, not so much the punk of the 70s, the late 70s of the UK, but more so the more hardcore aggressive scene that you got mainly out of Southern California. And I feel like without that genre, without that explosion in the 80s and mid 80s, you don't have those bands. I think the main difference, between the grunge bands and those bands is that there was kind of an acceptance, like especially when you talk about the tail end of the latter years of Henry Rollins' Black Flag. They start slowing stuff down and kind of
My War and all that. Yeah,
the My War years, where you're kind of accepting the heaviness of bands like Sabbath. I even think down.
Which I mean, My War specifically Side 2 and Flipper were so influential to bands like Melvins and whatnot, and way more so than something like Sabbath. At the time, again, I don't want to get into a meritorious debate about what was going on in like Heaven and Hell and Dio era Sabbath and all that, but it had nothing to do with what people called grunge, which was a term that was applied to a genre of music that already existed that nobody playing that music thought was accurate or like it made sense. But one cannot overestimate the influence of when Black Flag started slowing down.
Black Flag slowing down and hitting these places when these cats are of age to attend these shows.
Yes.
You know, all this stuff matters, right?
Well, and I've been lucky enough, I've had Keith Morris on the show, on my show Protonic, Kira Rossler, who played bass.
Played in Black Flag during the My War.
And she'd tell you all about it, which, by the way, not a bastion of feminism, that time of punk rock.
No.
So just going to throw that out there. But so much of what they did. And again, bands like Flipper, who have now are recognized for the genius that they the warped genius.
Shout out to Ted Falcone from Flipper, who from time to time watches this show. So hopefully this hits him on his Facebook. You know, Ted is always on Facebook posting something. So
he's a busy dude. Flipper, by the way, playing Caterwaul this year with Shannon Selberg of Cow singing, and Tony Ash on bass. How cool is that? How amazing is that? Tony Ash, who plays in my band. That's why that's funny, everybody. But also, he's one
someone
of
else.
bass players.
Someone else I feel comfortable calling a friend, Tony Ash.
Oh, 100%. But yeah, so Black Flag slowing down, Flipper, et cetera, et cetera. That led Melvins, who started off as a hardcore band. They were playing fast rippers, and then they slowed down, and everybody was like, boo, boo. Like, everyone hated it. People were not down for that at the time. And then, so that, you have bands like Green River, and Mother Love Bone and whatnot, and then and later Mudhoney, they kind of took it back to the original origins of the term grunge is more of if anyone's familiar with the Nuggets compilation, the old garage rock, here are the bands that you're not aware of, or maybe you once heard of, and the reason why you never have heard them because these records were they never came out, or if they came out, it came out and was lost immediately back before the internet archived everything. That was what grunge was. It was garagey, kind of dirty, nastily produced music, which is why somebody just arbitrarily was that's what this is. And it wasn't, because all that stuff was coming from punk rock, but also hey, yeah, but hold up. Hard rock, and especially hair metal, may be utterly preposterous, and, these riffs are weak, but that doesn't mean that all of this was always terrible. There's some, I like some of those early Aerosmith records, and people only think of their Desmond Child crappy ballads now, but that was a hell-ass rock band for 3 or 4 years. Alice Cooper band. People only remember the decent stuff would
you say this? Because I always think that I don't want to say countercultures, but counter musical cultures, I guess we should say, are always trying to be antithetical to what the popular sound is. And in the mid 80s and the late 80s, there's such a compressed, tight sound of heavy metal.
Right. And so this is where I was going with it, ironically. So, and I know that's how.
Let me get this out, and then you tell me what you think. So there's such a tight sound, and then also too, I think there's an acceptance of other genres, so to speak, that are in the weird category.
Yeah,
gothy,
Devo,
post-punk.
You would not believe every one of the quote unquote grunge bands loves Devo. Right.
You said Devo. They said emo. Sorry, Devo.
No.
Yeah. So you know what I mean. What maybe we'll call alternative now, but everybody was kind of. If I didn't get it, it was new wave. Or if it had a synthesizer and I didn't get it, it was new wave. Right.
Yeah. It was retroactively classified as new wave, which became as meaningless as anything else. Just like how grunge was all right, what does Mudhoney and Tad have in common with Candlebox? Well, nothing.
Nothing. Nothing sonically, but there is something about this sound. So it's okay, let's strip this down. It feels and I don't know if anybody's sitting down. We're gonna strip it down, but there's a stripped down sound to this music, and they're throwing these fuzz pedals in front of everything. And I don't know if it's out of necessity. I don't know if it's out of trying to mimic a sound of what you're listening to because you're bumping 70s stoner rock, so to speak, Sabbath stuff.
So I have answers for some of that, 'cause I've talked to these people on my show.
Yeah.
And flat out, it's because those weren't sounds that you were hearing. And they like those sounds, and they're oh, wow, it's a shame that this music got really indulgent. Meanwhile, these huge hard rock bands of the time, even if they like were resting on like former glory or whatnot, have these like tight, constrained other kinds of sounds that just, it was ubiquitous but like dangerous at the same way. Whereas if you have like, again, what's the first Mudhoney record? Super Fuzz Big Muff, right? It's like the name of two pedals, which is just a cool phrase. It's a cool phrase to have for an album title, but it's literally two vintage pedals that you could not give away at the time. If you were like getting into guitar, you could like go pick up one of those for like $50.
Yeah.
Whereas now, like if you a vintage one, I mean, look, the Sub Pop store in the Seattle airport sells like a vintage reissue Big Muff that's like $300 or something, and that's about right.
And also, this is the era of pointy guitars.
Exactly. And so what they were doing is going back.
Old Les Paul or an Epiphone, any kind of round traditional body style. I mean, Kurt Cobain brings the Mustang,
the Jaguar and Mustang, which
the
nobody
Jaguar
was
back.
looking for Fenders.
No one was playing Fenders. And so the fact that these it's to me, it's always, you know, you talk to the old thrash guys and they're like, yeah, we always had nice tennis shoes because the labels were giving us free tennis shoes, but our pants were ripped because we were poor.
I literally just mentioned Tad, Adam. Yes, we've mentioned Tad. Thank you.
It's always out of a necessity. So the sonic quality, I think, that we hear from this genre, so to speak, is also out of a necessity of what I can afford to get.
Right, because that's the thing to remember is like now all this stuff is like vintage, is pricey, et cetera, et cetera. But this was like, these were the cheap guitars. You could go to the pawn shop and go to the music store, pick one up, and everything would be copacetic. You could just start rocking. And again, getting back to what I was saying before, it also, you know, again, hard rock from the 70s was out of vogue. Everything was like trying to sound like as modern as possible, and therefore sounding as dated as possible, frankly. And that was notable too because you had a bunch of bands that were trying to get away from that because they wanted to have what was the authenticness of punk rock and the expression of, you know, this, we like grab you by the throat level of intensity, but take the things that don't suck about hard rock. And these records are, you know, like, okay, Combination by Aerosmith is a jam, right? Does anybody know Combination? Well, they opened their shows with it. A few people must know it. But it's pretty far away from, Dude Looks Like a Lady and all that. I mean, like, which, by the way.
Also, when these bands, like we have to admit, also when these bands are coming into the fold, Aerosmith in the mid-'80s, Aerosmith is going through their, Done With Mirrors. This is all.
Oh, it's horrible. It's
Permanent
not
Vacation, their rehab phase as well.
Yeah, and that's why, I mean, look at was it Rehab Doll? Was the Green River record, right? Like, it was a joke. It was a joke because all the big rock bands were, they were in these embarrassing time period. I mean, even Ozzy, right? Like I like Bark of the Moon. I like both the Randy Rhoads records, but like stuff got rotten pretty quick with Ozzy's solo career. And if you're coming from that place, I'm not saying everybody was, but that's if you want to understand how a band like Nirvana and how Mudhoney and whatnot can come out of nowhere. It's not that they came out of nowhere. They were just. Yes, Otto, we would get to it. That like, it was the one that struck gold, but as was mentioned in the comments, also things were happening in the desert the same way. My friend Mario Lally, which was like running those generator parties, and that's where Caius, which if people are not aware of, if you know Queens of the Stone Age, yeah, that's the Jurassic period antecedent. That like there was basically a bunch of scenes in a bunch of different areas where people were like, hey, we still like heavy music, we like intense music, but we don't think that this doesn't work for us. This what's being fed to us. Because again, things were becoming a copy of a copy for like hair metal and whatnot. Like I love Van Halen. I think Van Halen's great. And I'm not talking about the Gary Sharon era. I'm not talking about Van Hagar. I'm talking about Van Halen here. But then you had bands that were like copies of a copy of a copy of Van Halen. And nobody, I assure you, no one's looking for that. Even people that think they were looking for that, that's what they had available to them. So you had bands that like Green River that was like ripping it up, and they were bringing in like stuff that people liked from, like people forgot all about those early Alice Cooper band records. Those are great rock records. Like,
but
people
again,
remember a couple songs.
I think this is why this music hits journalists a certain way, and.
Right.
And it blows up on a whole different level because those early records don't hit. The early Soundgarden doesn't hit.
Oh no, not at all.
Bleach
Like
doesn't
not at all.
hit. And they tried.
Even Green River, even Mother Love Bone. Although
Mother
one can
Love Bone
argue,
definitely didn't hit.
if Andrew Wood hadn't died, maybe they
I
would've,
think
but-
Alice in Chains, I think, was the only band of that scene. Again, this is why I don't think grunge is a genre, because Alice in Chains does not fit
No.
at all with those cats.
And Alice in Chains, by the way, can I just tell you that as someone who's still actively rocking, Alice in Chains isn't just rehabbed, so to speak, but like completely reputationally rehabbed. Like it's almost as if they might have been like, from the way you listen to kids now, they were like next door to Soundgarden and Mudhoney rocking out, and like Nirvana was on the next window, and that's not the case at all.
Me and Cobra were talking recently. Mike Cobra is the man that named the show. Actually, This Is Revolution. It was called something different and gave it the look it's got now. So always we send a shout out to the Cobras.
He's done album art for me too. Like
I will be singing on a project with him.
Very, very good. I can't wait to hear, because he's great. Because Happy Fangs was incredible. That was,
It's usually the riffs are heavy.
We could do a podcast about Happy Fangs, and I'd be stoked to do it.
But we were talking about the new Alice in Chains record because I heard it. Again, Spotify made a mix. I was in my office doing something, and this ridiculous riff came on. I ran in the room. I was like, "What the fuck is this?"
Yeah.
And it was the new Alice in Chains, and I was like, "Damn, these dudes are brutally heavy." But that aside, I think they were the only band of that genre that was kind of made for success at that time.
Oh, ready made. Well, but then
over. I don't know if a lot of people know the story. In 1991, I believe there was a Monsters of Rock tour planned with Megadeth. This is when all these bands released their biggest selling records of that time. I don't think Metallica or Megadeth have sold anything bigger than these records. The Black Album comes out for Metallica. Countdown comes out for Megadeth. Seasons in the Abyss comes out for Slayer, and Anthrax releases Persistence of Time. All these guys are playing arenas at this point. They're arena bands. So this tour was Megadeth, Anthrax, Slayer, Testament, and Death Angel was supposed to be the opener, and they had just done their sorry, I gotta fly in my room. They just done their major label album Act 3, which I love that record, which also would have kind of fit within this category of music. They get into a horrible van accident, which permanently maimed some of the members, so they couldn't do the tour. And so Alice in Chains does the tour.
Yep.
And literally every night people hate them.
Sure, because they weren't coming
all
from that
those
world.
bands.
Yeah.
Stone Temple Pilots, they opened for the big metal bands. And when metal kind of hit its decline in the mid 90s, when grunge is taking off, all those grunge bands kind of threw a middle finger to the metal guys that helped them out, which I thought was kind of fucked up.
Okay, that's one way to look at it. Sure.
It's like, oh.
I mean, but were they really helping out all the grunge bands? Were they really? Because they sort of, in a lot of ways, some of them maybe, but a lot of them view them as like natural competition. Like,
I mean, look, if you're
the lay of the
taking me out
land
on
has
tour,
changed. Yeah.
If you're taking me out on tour, there's nothing you're gonna do other than pull my, And look, we've both opened bigger tours.
Sure.
Have fun getting the sound check.
Oh yeah.
When you're the opener.
And look, and the thing where like the bands put their stuff too far up front, like intentionally. I mean, like whatever. That's neither here nor there. I'm just saying that, and I'm not saying that's exactly what you were saying, but implying that like these grunge bands were like thankless to the ones that came before them. They weren't really coming at it from the same place of a lot of these bands. Now, if you talk to about something like Anthrax, sure, that. And again, when I was talking to Lombardo, I was talking about how Slayer was like the band that the punks and the metalheads everyone agreed.
Almost
Slayer's
like Motorhead, yeah.
Motorhead and Slayer. Those were the examples I gave. There was two bands that like the punks and the metalheads could agree on. It was those two bands, and literally nothing else. Which is weird to think about now because kids today don't care. They don't care about any of that. But like it was crazy how much of a different world that was, and how like the idea of not that kind of intense music. My kind of intense music, right? Like it was important. It was like somehow important, and it was a distinction with a difference, but without that much of a difference. And so it incredibly notable that, and this is documented well in this the 1991, The Year Punk Broke. This is a documentary. It's got Sonic Youth, Nirvana, Mudhoney, Babes in Toyland, all kinds of Gumball, I think's on there.
Is Babes in Toyland the group Julie Christmas is in?
No, that's Kat Magellan, Lori Barbero, and then depending on it's either Michelle or I can't think of her name right now. Okay. I'm gonna get emails. But Babes in Toyland were, everyone knows Hole, everyone knows Courtney Love, right? Yeah. But there's a through line with Kat Magellan and Babes in Toyland. Babes in Toyland was like more like the real deal stuff, right? So think of like, I'm gonna get emails about this, but Pearl Jam to Mudhoney is like Hole to like Babes in Toyland for the ladies.
I see that.
And I don't mean this as an insult. I'm just saying that, like, from level of notoriety, etc., which isn't to cast any shade on either one of those other bands. But 1991, The Year Punk Broke is an accidental tour documentary of Nirvana changing everything, basically. And they're on tour. It's like Nirvana, Sonic Youth, and all these bands, right? And they're all just, and none of these bands sound like each other, but they're just going. There's rock, they're rocking, they're playing all these kids. It gets bigger and bigger. And nobody knew, and it was a frequent topic of guests on my show when I have them on, of any kind of musical background, is like, where were you at as a band when the world changed? Which is to say, where were you when Nevermind hit? Because we have not seen a cultural event like that since. And I firmly stand by
I'll go with that.
Okay, well, that's a different podcast, but I'm telling you right now, this is we will not see a cultural event like that again. And the reason why is because everything's balkanized. All of our media is balkanized in such a way that everything's in like these little like small subsections of a subsection of a subgenre, and like worlds within worlds. And social media is designed to make profit off of people being put in these little circles and bubbles and friend groups. And we won't see it again. But it was a cultural movement that it worked because the music was there. And for me, and this is where it comes back to me, that like I grew up with like rock and roll loving parents. They saw Led Zeppelin on Day of the Green. They saw Ramones at Winterland. Like they liked, but they also, love their Crosby, Stills, and Nash too, but when I heard Nirvana, that was the first time I was like, oh, this is for me. This is like my stuff. Because you got to remember, there's no parallel now for what it was at the time, which is there was no instant availability of everything. Like if you lived in some dumbass town like I did, that was like not close to where like shows were happening, and like there was like anyone to like guide you along, if you found stuff, it was almost by accident. Or because you were looking for it. And so Nirvana begat, finding out bands like Sonic Youth and Butthole Surfers and Melvins. Scratch Acid. I had Bradford on last night on my show from Scratch Acid. I saw that. Kurt Cobain wears a Scratch Acid shirt. Next thing you know, the entire discography of this kind of like obscure, only true heads know Austin noise rock band gets put in front of this gigantic audience. Like things along those lines. It was a sea change. And it was a sea change. It wasn't based on something like pop punk, where it's like, oh yeah, what if like Buzzcocks but less musically interesting, and like what if like Ramones but not as intense kind of thing. It was based on all these bands already doing something that was a reaction to the culture ahead of them, which is to say that the arena rock bands, and you reference Anthrax, you reference Slayer, like Big Four concert, all that. Yeah, cool, but that wasn't like, I'm talking about stuff like Mr. Big and things like that. Like, you know what I mean? Where like,
well, everything gets overbloated. Like if history repeats itself, if the 80s and 70s punk is a response to the overbloat of what happens to quote unquote classic rock into prog rock, right?
Sure, but staying back on point, you have things like Warrant and like Rat and stuff, where it's like, okay, maybe there's like a couple good tunes here and there, but this is what is the cultural paradigm of like this. These are your options. You have Cherry Pie, or you have
everything
later period Poison.
When everything becomes Love in an Elevator, right?
Yeah,
exactly. Janie Lane gives, before he passes away, sadly, and I wasn't a Warrant fan at all.
White Lion.
Look, don't make me demonetize my own video by playing Wait, but when you have Janie Lane saying we delivered the record to, I forget whatever label they were on, and they said we don't hear a hit like Love in an Elevator, take it back, and and put a song like Love in an Elevator. And Janie Lane, I didn't know he wrote all the songs for Warrant. He wrote Cherry Pie in a Night. And he goes, now I'm the cherry pie guy. And he hated it,
but more so than Twin Peaks, yeah. But
and that, to me, that becomes the legacy of what people think,
yeah,
quote unquote, grunge killed. But if you really, again, we talked about this,
they were doing a great job of killing themselves. In some cases,
I
literally.
think the people that were at the top of that scene, because there were so many people chasing, had already abandoned a certain aesthetic. Motley Crue had already stripped down and abandoned all that glammy shit with Dr. Feelgood in '89. It was done in '89.
But that doesn't change the fact that culturally the impact had happened. In some cases, the damage had been done, if that's how you want to construe it, right? That like there was this. That's what big rock music was, flat out. Yeah. And so the idea of, and again, there's many other scenes we could talk about. Like, we could talk about, by the way, R.A.M. used to be like a ripping rock band, right? People know them for like the Out of Time stuff and the Automatic for the People and the kind of like, and the ballads and along those lines. There was stuff happening in Athens. I mean, you've had Bill on, he's talks all about it. There were these pockets of, I want to say resistance so bad, but it's not a pocket of resistance to play music, of people trying to do something real. And that manifests in different ways because there was still the ability to have a distinct culture based regionally, right? Screaming Trees were a very well-respected and loved band in the Pacific Northwest, but until that one song that got on MTV, no one outside the Northwest knew who they were. And one could argue why that might be the case over and over and over again. But it had to do with the fact that the cultural landscape just was different then. It was harder to find stuff unless you had like somebody who worked at a record store, such as myself, that would tell you. That would be like, hey, you need to check out this record. You need to check out the Caius record. You need to check out, Pylon. You need to check out like all these other bands. You need to check out the Minutemen. And a lot of these bands came up during this like kind of not great period for rock. That is, they were reaching the peak of their power in like the late 80s and early 90s, to which culture, people kind of wanted something different, whether they could articulate that or not. And even some of the bands, like as you mentioned, Motley Crue took a turn towards like they got more like quote unquote real in their way. And I don't want to turn this into a Motley Crue podcast, but I mean, they realized it themselves that like, hey, we can't keep doing this for forever. Maybe we don't want to keep doing this for forever. But those were just dudes that they liked the band Sweet. They liked Slade. They liked these glam bands, and they were doing their version of it.
I think I don't want to get into what killed hair metal because Teray and I already did 2 hours on that. But really,
exactly, and we haven't really got it. We're just getting to the grunge, let alone what killed it.
What I want to kill the conversation though. I want to kill the conversation that this music came along and then that music had to die. That music was
That's absurd.
It was, Nero was playing the fiddle.
Yeah, it was already, again, they did a great job of eventing themselves.
But what I find interesting about that music juxtaposed to grunge is there is a revival scene where people get excited about that stuff, kind of like you see with boy bands now, where,
or 80s pop. People have fetishized 80s pop.
Love it.
To a degree that I did not expect. Where I'm like, wow, really?
I don't see the same revival with grunge. And I think it's because it was so serious and self-indulgent, in my opinion. I look at that genre way different than you look at that genre. And I look at cultural touchstones much differently because I look at it from maybe a broader lens of how music changed.
Broader? I've got a narrow lens, huh?
Well, you never include hip hop, and I think
there's plenty of people. Look, I can talk about hip hop. There's so many people more qualified to talk about hip hop.
Can I finish?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Around the same time that Nirvana hits, the Chronic hits, and Snoop Dogg hits, and I think that's an extremely important record, even though I may not be the biggest fan of that record. I think it's an important record for how sonically records sound moving forward.
Gangster rap was like that is the grunge of of that era.
Well,
But also it was something that was really happening, and like it was a different sound too.
extremely influential on what's going to happen, kind of maybe even after grunge with new metal. And I think those two things are competing at the same time, because grunge ends up becoming what it didn't want to be, but what it wanted to be, which is arena rock.
Well, certainly there's a lot of people making a lot of money trying to make that the case. And the best success story for that is definitely Pearl Jam, which is interesting because it's people that from, Jeff Ament and like the Mother Love Bone. There were bands before Pearl Jam that were kind of more like in that world. And Pearl Jam, they were very much a packaged product at the time, and they rebelled against that. Mm-hmm. And they became, to a certain degree, less successful as a commercial, as what the commercial elements wanted them to be, because they wanted to be more of a band. And this has nothing to do with the relative merits of Pearl Jam's music, but that is a bold choice. That's like a Neil Young style choice. Like, no, I'm going to do whatever I want. Mm-hmm. And they, from a perspective of being an additive force for music, and I'm talking about things like fighting against Ticketmaster and stuff along those lines. It's pretty hard to argue that like Pearl Jam have been like, a social force for good. Nothing Alice in Chains can lay claim to. Mm-hmm. But that was, Pearl Jam 10 and Nirvana Nevermind were at the same time. And like one was coming from a place for a working band that had been out and touring for a long time. Mm-hmm. And granted, when they started off, people were like, oh, it's Diet Melvins, and they weren't wrong necessarily, especially with that first record. But they grew as a band and they got better. And they happened to hit on something that, you know what? I love the Pixies too. And maybe the Pixies, could have done that, but the Pixies didn't do that. And it has to do with like the songs, it has to do with like the video, it has to do with the time period, et cetera, et cetera. But what you have with Pearl Jam, and again, I want to be explicitly clear, they worked against this, but they were like the first iteration of, maybe we can like guide this a little bit. I'm talking about like the record companies and the major label record companies.
Yeah.
And then you have some like, very eager participants like Alice in Chains. And I'm not saying anything against Alice in Chains. I'm just saying that like those guys were ready. They were ready for like what you're saying. We do want to play arenas. Yes, we do. We would like that. Thank you. We would like to like become as big as possible. And then you go further down the line, then you get like, again, copy of a copy. And next thing you know, you've got like Candlebox and Silverchair, where it's like, like they got the floppy hair. You like that, right? You little morons.
Well, it all becomes what it hates.
And things that don't fit, like look at Vernon Reid, look at Living Colour, right? Why wasn't Living Colour huge? Well, I don't know. Cult of Personality's a jam, man, but like didn't fit the profile.
I love that riff.
If that band one of the best guitar riffs of all time.
I think if that band comes out now, they still have problems.
Maybe, and like let's not put too fine a point on it. Like maybe they just didn't fit the image.
This is We'll never forget this conversation. I've had multiple conversations with people even with Boots Riley about all black heavy bands.
Yeah.
It's good luck. Good luck.
And for every story of like the band Death, right? That like,
sure.
I'm not talking about the metal band. I'm talking about the post-punk band from Detroit. Yeah. There's a great documentary too, where people just find like, hey, this is great. Like, oh my God. And then people like, and then they have this like latter-day career based upon the fact that like this unknown, quote unquote unknown band was there. Yeah, but they couldn't get arrested at the time. Well, actually, they probably could get arrested. They probably got arrested just plenty, I would imagine.
Even with the shit I do now. Good luck.
Yeah, I mean, it's the elephant in the room, right? And so there was the idea of what was happening in the Seattle music world, which, again, I know a lot of those people, whether it's through the show, whether it's the fact that, Crover plays with me, like whatever. I know a lot of those people. And it's not like they were like, oh, now you need to look like this and like play this kind of music, et cetera, et cetera. Far from it. And I think it was like the opposite of that. But by the same token, it's Seattle. It's Seattle, and it's like basically a bunch of punk rockers like writing like hard rock riffs and like trying to do a thing that sounds cool. And it happened to be in the moment, and it also happened to be something that like a lot of people are like, I smell money. And anytime people smell money, There you go.
We if you think about some of the bands that come out that aren't from Seattle, because where's Dinosaur Jr.'s from Massachusetts, right?
They're they're as Andy World, who is on Moving Extravaganza with me, always reminds me they're from his neck of the woods. Yeah, they're from
Are they from Western Mass?
Yeah.
So not everything that is in that ballpark is from Seattle, but we have to admit, once those two big records hit, Nevermind and 10, everybody's going to get a deal. Once people found out that Detroit was where, all these church singing Negroes was, everybody flocks to where you're getting deals.
I mean, and like that was kind of like the Motown thing too, like that's
you got teased hair and you can sound just like Motley Crue. Everybody's getting the deal.
Yeah, here's a wheelbarrow full of money. Go.
Yeah, here's your first tour. Here's a bus, a lighting guy. You'll figure it out.
Well, and so you have bands that were already operating, Smashing Pumpkins out of Chicago, who I personally don't care for. And I just need to throw that out there because
you said you don't like Smashing Pumpkins.
I don't like Smashing Pumpkins. I really don't like Billy Corgan, but whatever. I don't have to like them to.
What if I just took off my thing like Scooby-Doo and
it was Billy Corgan? See, this isn't Alex Jones. That wouldn't happen. Gotcha, Billy. Also, that guy's a dick. But you had like other bands in the area that like maybe they didn't fit the region of that, but they fit the criteria of like, being a certain type of band that had this new heavy sound, which already was happening. Look at Homestead, right? Look at even like Latter Day SST. Like there were all these bands, like some of which never saw any of their due for it. And but some like Husker Du that like were doing it even before, but there wasn't like this environment that supported it.
But that music, again, the hardcore music, which I think could only exist in Reagan's America, and can only exist in that form with communist Soviet Union. And I think the fall of this, and I get really weird, but when you see the fall of the Soviet Union, music really changes. It really goes inward.
Well, everything. Because look, it's really easy to like remember and peace and love in my heart. But little Stevie Van Zandt, ain't gonna play in Sun City. That was his whole deal. And I love Stevie Van Zandt. Like he's great. He's like how could you be mad at him? He's on The Sopranos. He's a amazing dude.
Oh, that is him on The Sopranos, huh?
Oh, you better believe it.
I didn't even realize that.
It's Silvio, man. It's but like there were these like movement events, like, Hands Across America, and like what's the one? We Are the World, right? Like there's all these like, all right, cool, and that it's not that goes away, but like that goes out of vogue, right? That kind of like big, heavy-handed.
The big bad is gone.
Yes.
And the big bad is us. Pop culture changes kind of across the board.
Well, and that becomes people like wanting like quote unquote party music, right? So you have like, all these bands like, like Rat was rounding clubs for a long time before they hit. And, there's a lot of bands that like, again, like my favorite example is White Lion, because I think first of all, it's hilarious that they're called White Lion. And secondly, I think they're like maybe C tier out of that. But, Dokken and look, Twisted Sister like had their day in the sun, and that was a band that there's a great documentary about Twisted Sister.
Great documentary.
So good,
Great
good.
Documentary.
Because they were a working band, and like they worked the markets like without any support whatsoever, and like build up this huge audience. So, but the point to what we're talking about is people kind of wanted to party. So that's what sort of like, there's like the heyday of quote unquote hair metal, which as we've all established was doing a great job machine gunning itself in the foot by just eating its own. It's like, think of the aristocracy, right? Royals marrying other royals and like inbreeding. Basically. And that's what hair metal was doing. And meanwhile, you have stuff like, like Soundgarden coming up where people are like, whoa, that's awesome because it's super heavy, but it's super catchy. And like, that's crazy. I've never heard anything like that. And you have
it's a throwback to Sabbath, and a Sabbath that they don't know, because now we're talking about
because it's informed by punk, because it's informed by what happened earlier.
But we're talking about post Ronnie James Dio Sabbath that's existing right now.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
can't
Where they had
remember
that.
guy's name.
Man, you could say that was you, and I'd be like, oh really? Oh, okay. Because ain't no one listening to those
I think
records. Man.
Blackie Lawless might have been on a
Probably.
Deep Purple record or some shit like that. Like it's we're talking about those guys are going through it.
Yeah,
in this moment.
and let's be clear. And there's a great. I don't want to sidebar a sidebar, but there's a great Dio documentary that
I cried. I cried.
Even if you think you don't like Dio, and maybe you don't, but it's super worth watching because it's super interesting. And look, man, like that was a band that reinvented itself successfully and then failed to do it after that.
I mean, did you just be there? We have to talk on the sidebar. If we were here, we'd be hugging right now.
Yeah.
And you watch way more music docs than I can stomach.
Sure.
But some shit I just don't care about. I'm like, I mean, fuck that band. But
enough.
the Dio,
right.
There's the music documentaries I think are much watched. The Last Doll.
The New York Dolls one. There's another one about Arthur Kane.
Another one about Arthur Kane? Last Doll is about Arthur Kane.
Yeah, but it's there's another. I've seen that one. What's it called? I'm gonna look it up.
But the Last Doll, the Dio documentary, which is pretty recent.
New York Doll. It's just called. It's also good. I haven't seen that more recent one, but I mean, New York Dolls are fascinating because that's a band that like could have been.
That's a proto punk band. We can't talk about any of this music without the New York Dolls. But the Dio documentary.
So good.
Wow.
I think Dreamers Never Die. I think it's
Dreamers Never.
It blew
Talk
me
about
away.
a working class rock guy. I didn't know he didn't make any money in those Rainbow years.
Yeah.
Where they said they bought his house, so they were about to kick him out of the house he lived in.
Well, and then like, what's the first thing after like he's out of the band? They have a huge hit immediately, like because they do like they do that one song like it's a great tune. I can't remember what it is right now.
But he didn't want to do that kind of stuff.
He didn't want to do it. He didn't want to do it. He wanted, like, and it was sort of like, wow, that's wild. That like they were like, yeah, but we'll have a big hit if you do it. I'm like, nope. And then they do 79. They do Since You've Been Gone is the name of it. Immediately huge hit, like immediately. But it's that's a different era, right? But there's not any really corollary to it within this early 90s time, other than the fact that you have bands that like were reluctantly thrust into the spotlight and were maybe less reluctantly put into the spotlight. And say what you will about, and again, I want to be here to say that Pearl Jam deserves a lot of respect. You don't have to like their music, but for going inward even more so and deciding to like be like a rock band of record and really engage with their fans in a way that eschews these larger corporate entities, taking some of the values from a band like Fugazi, which also should be in the conversation. But when they started out, they were absolutely, like, hey, we can sell this to these idiot kids in suburbia. Great. And it doesn't mean that like it makes the music any less. It's just that like it was a cultural flashpoint at the time within rock music. And one of the reasons why is because people weren't hearing these like, the unpolished riffs. Everything was like just candy-coated production, like just like as slick as can be, and people weren't looking for that. And so then I'll
disagree. I don't think people look for anything. I think people like what you give them. I don't think anyone was sitting around going, "Oh, where can I get?" Because you could find it. It existed.
Yeah, from the larger culture, right? Like
I think what happened. This is just my opinion. This is punk music that looks easier to market to the burgeoning suburbs that are growing at this time. Malls are being built out everywhere. You're from a suburb. You tell me if I'm lying.
The mall was the only place to hang out.
The mall was the only place you're gonna go find any of this shit stuff. Yeah. And this music fit, and also the people that are writing about it who are so important. The term gatekeeping gets thrown around way too much. This is a time of real deal gatekeepers. This is a time of being in Rolling Stone is going to make your career.
And then you also had like the SST bumper sticker, like the corporate rock still sucks. And that's where it was. And then you hear about, oh, so-and-so sold out. They sold out, which you never, when do you ever hear about that now? No one ever says anything about that.
Never.
Because it's been completely co-opted. It's literally part of the journey
these
now.
cats got major label deals, and I'm not mad at them for that, but
No,
it's
good for
just
them.
punk rock with a new name.
Yeah.
The leather jackets have been taken away. There's no spiked hair. That's now cliche. It's the same music.
Yeah. Well, but the thing that is so notable to me about all of that is that it was authentic.
Yeah.
And it was immediately commodified into something else. But there was that anti-commercial standpoint of like, oh, did so-and-so sell out when they made this record? That was a real conversation that happened in record stores. And like nobody wanted to be the band that sold out. Oh, they changed their sound.
Yes.
And that is, it sounds like science fiction to talk about it now. But it was like ubiquitous at the time. And it's
that's
pretty
all
notable.
genres of music. All genres of music.
Across all, and then if you want to talk about capitalism, which I know that on this show that gets discussed now and again, that like the fact that people can't even envision like a band not going for any ring that's offered to them, 360 deal or partnership, paid partnership, whatever, like that's the perfect example of it. Because when you and I were coming up and we were in like our late teens and 20s, it was everywhere, and you had zines opining about it. There used to be these things called zines, people. They were like magazines, but they were smaller, and they're usually Xerox. And it was a hot commodity to discuss. And so what's so fascinating is that's coming up as a discussion topic. Mm-hmm. And that's something that like you have like your place like Adbusters and things like that that get into the mix. Yeah, don't get me started on them. But you also have at the same time, you got these people, like I like to envision a bunch of dudes, because it's always dudes, smoking cigars in a room. Mm-hmm. Like, hey, these alternative bands, they're making good money for us. How do we make our own? They're too independent. They're too willful. We need people that are going to be ready to do what we want them to do when we want to do it. And that's when you start getting to what killed grunge, which, again, as we need to adequately say, was a catch-all term applied from an outside party for a disparate group of bands that were grouped together as a marketing term. And we say, well, they decided they could make their own alternative bands, because that's what they called them. Alternative. It was alternative. And then that became like, well, alternative to what? Like, if it's it's a dominant cultural force in music, then it's not an alternative, right?
You know what I felt, to your point, slight sidebar to your point,
sure.
The term indie used to piss me off. Used to piss me off. We're an indie band. I was like, oh, but you're on Universal.
Yeah. How are you exactly? Because it used to mean independent, and then that just became divorced of the independent.
You have a sponsorship with fucking Gibson.
You got a Toyota commercial. How indie is that?
How is that indie? No, it's like the style of music we do.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Like what? Yeah,
it's just like songwriter. Oh, so
it sounds like REM without any of the danger. Okay. Yeah.
The term indie, which I think is a late 90s, 2000s term that also kind of comes off this. Again, when a term gets out of vogue, hair metal, new metal, grunge, you just change the term and it's the same music. I will say this, what Conan's talking about, by the time that you start getting manufactured bands not from Seattle, which is the derivative, right? I want to be this, but not this. So you're talking about a younger cohort of people that grew up with totally different influences. So these are the people that grew up with that first wave of thrash metal, but also, kind of like the Nirvanas and the Alice in Chains.
Yeah, like that Refused record, right? Where it's like,
the first
like,
Refused record?
Yeah, well, where it's so influential.
The Shake and Punk to Come.
Yeah, and people hear it and they're like, oh my God, especially if you've never heard Nation of Ulysses. Because you know who's heard Nation of Ulysses? Refused. But I love them. Mm-hmm. But that was like a bomb in a room when that came out. But not in the way, and just like in the way that At the Drive-In, who had a much slower ramp up. Mm-hmm. That last At the Drive-In record, that was the closest thing in my lifetime I've seen to something like, oh, this could go a lot bigger than it even is now, and it's already too big.
Well, I don't know if you agree with this, Conan. I think punk, and I write about this in a piece I wrote a few years back, which I'm finally finishing part 2.
Has it been that long?
Say again?
Has it been that long? 'Cause I remember
It's been a couple years,
Jesus
and
Christ.
then
Wow.
it took a lot of research.
Yeah.
I did a lot of research for that, and
Yeah.
this one is a fair amount as well. But I make the correlation between grunge and how you can go from the death of Cobain in '94 to what you get with pop punk, which I think what really kills this genre, so to speak, is the fact that we are taking punk music, and not we, but major labels are taking this countercultural music and somewhat lifestyle and making it extremely marketable, much like you see with the gangster rap lifestyle, because all this stuff is happening at the same time and the same people are buying it.
Well, sure, because you look at someone like Eazy-E, right? Who like there's a lot to say about Eazy-E, but he lived those streets, and then you have people that are like trying to, oh yeah, what if Eazy-E, but also like Suburbia likes him. Like,
because it's danger. Everybody wants danger, and it was dangerous at one point in time to accept different political notions. Like the first waves of punk and hardcore is extremely leftist and pro-communism, and by the time you get to the 90s, politics are pretty much gone outside of identity issues.
Well, and there's rare cases where there's a political band that gets into like the popular zeitgeist, like Chumbawamba, but they get like people don't realize like that song, the song about the getting up and the get down and I get up, whatever it is. Like they were like a agit political band. Like they put out,
I get knocked down.
And nobody knows that they put out records for years. AK Press darlings. Of like all of these like records of like political music, and then all people know is that Frat Boy song.
but like think about this music that's entirely this extremely inward, right? Extremely inward, and we have this blow up of the suburbs, and with Reagan gone, the big bad is gone. Everyone is running a victory lap. Toni Morrison is talking about how Bill Clinton is the first black president, right? So even though conditions for a lot of people, I'm sure she wished she had that one back before she went. With her last words, like I fucked up.
Like McDonald's too.
But when you think about,
it used to be fun to laugh at that guy. Now it's just sad.
Well, I mean
Clinton. Anyway, so go ahead.
But I don't know how you feel about this. When you think about the fact that Kurt Cobain dies, and this is all coincidental, the same year that Dookie comes out.
Yeah.
And
this is going back to your piece about like, sort of like it's, hey guys, mall fun. We're doing mall fun now.
Oh, dude, mall fun is really where it's all at, because that's that's who's buying records of all these genres of music.
That's where the money is.
So it's like, what do you want to see that a gangster's life ain't fun? You're going to get a whole bunch of Dickies wearing, black guys and lowriders. You want to see, the drug-addled life of a 20-something greasy-haired stoner. Okay. We're going to give you that ad nauseum. And the derivative of that to me is Green Day.
Yeah.
And when that album hits, and it hits hard.
Oh, it's huge.
I believe because Super Unknown come out around the same time.
Yeah, it's like the same. I think it's the same year. I can't remember exactly. But like,
so these grunge bands are hitting their arena status.
And Soundgarden is a great example of that. Yeah. And one of the reasons why is because you have a band at the peak of their power. Very creative, melding like the best of like these, super heavy riffs with just incredible songwriting. That if you're like a fan of the Beatles or something, you can be like, oh yeah, I like that Black Hole Sun song. It's really good. And you also have Chris Cornell, who's honestly like one of that generation's best singers. I would say like Cornell, Mark Lanigan, PJ Harvey. Like, look, I'm just going off the dome here on this, but that counts for a lot. Because you have people that like maybe they don't care about like Alice Cooper Band and like early Aerosmith and like non-embarrassing, it does exist, people, Kiss songs, but they can be like, that's a great tune, I like that, and that can connect with people. But also, if you have money behind it, it certainly helps to connect, because like, you can say a lot about Billy Joe, not Billy Joel, those are different people. Billy Joe from Green Day,
You leave the piano man out of this.
he's fine. He does the thing for his band just fine. But he'd be the first one to admit that he's not like, like generationally amazing singer or anything along those lines. Meanwhile, you have Lanigan in Screaming Trees. They couldn't get arrested until like Lanigan went solo. There's a lot of reasons for that, and some of it's luck. But you have Lanigan, R.I.P., who had a much more successful career after Screaming Trees. Whether it's being like, in the Queens of the Stone Age live band and then being on some of those records, whether it's a solo record, so on and so on. But that's the artist path for that. Whereas, again, people don't... I'm waiting for Silverchair to have resurgence, which was always terrible. Because every other terrible band from the 90s has had like, hey, who's really good? Like so-and-so. And I thought I saw Sponge called out. Days of the Oh, Jesus. And also, any of this stuff that sounded like sub Alice in Chains, that which a friend of mine called it Earl music.
Yeah, we were talking about that last night, actually, on the show.
Yeah, Earl. Like, all of that sub Earl music, it's like...
That is the sound of a soulful white man. That's what Earl is.
It's the sound of a dude in a truck with a Punisher sticker is what it is.
It's the sound of a white guy
that doesn't understand what the Punisher is.
It's the sound of a white guy who kind of likes country, but doesn't hate black people that much.
Yeah, Godsmack and oh god, sorry Patrick. I think Silverchair is one of the. I'm still mad at Silverchair after all these years.
Silverchair stole your girlfriend.
Candlebox. No, they stole the soul, man. Where'd the soul go? Like, and Candlebox, Madonna put them out, and that was like, hey, these pretty boys, they sound just like Pearl Jam and Stone Temple Pilots. It's great.
I'm glad she put out Deftones and those.
She did put out Deftones, didn't she? I forgot about that.
She put out Deftones and those last Bad Brains records.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's just. I'm trying to divorce my personal taste from it big time, but it's if you actually go through and listen to the music, like the through lines through, like, listen to something like a Mother Love Bone and a Green River and even Misrep and the Calculations, all these like early bands, or a band like Steel Ball Bathtub, right? Which is clearly like, never was going to be a ready for primetime player, which is amazing because they were on a major too. And you go through and then you have like, you have your Nirvanas, you have your Pearl Jams, you have Soundgarden, so on and so on. But then you got like what comes after them. And that's, again, goes back to those dudes in the room. We can make our own. We can make our own grunge bands. These kids we have the formula. We can make this ourselves.
But again, these...
But it's the same level. But also, let me just say one more thing. It's at the same level of the people that are like, once Motley Crue hits, you have like... these sub like third generation copy of a copy Motley Crue's.
Poison.
Yeah.
The Poison.
I wasn't gonna name them, but yeah.
Name them. I will
Those
say
dudes
this again.
blow.
I'll say this again on the main show. I think the best, please go, Toussaint, if you are moderating this, can you go find the Full in Bloom interview of the guy that produced the Poison record? Because the way he describes how they blew up is, I love that story. He goes, I thought this band was horrible. I got the money to do the record because I needed the money to do, I needed the money. And after it was said and done, I didn't think they were going to sell any records. And the only reason why that band sold as many records as they did is because the label they were on, I think it was Columbia, had fired everybody. They had nothing to promote. And they said, well, what do we have? Well, this is band Poison that just completed an album. Yeah. And they got the entire promotion budget for a major label.
This is great from the chat. Sponge was an Aldi's version of STP. That's a Midwest reference, and I know that one.
Oof. And Aldi's
and by the way, Stone Temple Pilots was no great shakes to begin with, if you ask me. But they had a couple okay tunes, but like they were
that record 4, is it called number 4 or something?
Yeah,
is that with what's that song called? What would you do? What would you do?
I know what you're talking about.
What's the name of the song?
I couldn't tell you. Well, and they had like, like what?
What were you looking at? Sour Girl.
Yeah.
That song's a bop.
Well, I mean, I don't want to turn this into like, the Stone Temple Pilots like love theme or anything, but yeah, like Vaseline, like Interstate Love Song. They had a couple good
Vaseline
tunes.
is a jam. Well, I toured with a band that loved music I hated. And there's nothing worse than when like you're not driving and it's like driver picks and you're like, oh, you guys really do like Nickelback. I thought it was a joke.
No, that's why, like, it's as someone who, like, as still tours, like, it can be hard when we're playing with like younger bands. Like, I gotta be careful with what I say, because a lot of these bands, I'm like, those were clowns and jokes as far as I'm concerned, and they're like, oh, I played in a cover band and we covered that. I'm like,
all right, well, you covered clown joke music. You'll get over it.
Yeah, it's some clown shoes BS, but yeah, you do you, man.
Shit.
Which is why that Rodney Dangerfield bit in like Caddyshack where he's like, oh yeah, it's terrible, it's horrible. Oh, looks great on you though.
Yeah, you did a great job covering that.
No, looks good on you. It's good. And whatever the relative merits of like which I would call those the first generations, and that includes STP. Sorry, everybody, however many great songs they wrote. First generation. Like, hey, we can do this ourselves. Bands.
But they come out in like 91, 92.
They do, but they did not exist before that. Look,
not
Pantera. Did we know the Pantera story on this show?
Yeah.
Yeah, before fucking Hostile, any of that, man. Like those boys had the hair. They had the hairspray.
They wanted to be Van Halen.
Exactly. They were trying to do a Van Halen, man. And it's fine. Like it's just kind of like an anachronistic thing that didn't fit with their image. But like I have less beef with the Stone Temple Pilots of the world than like what came after them, because again, Days of the New was invoked. Oh my God, Jesus! I mean, it's just like where it's like literally has none of the intensity at all, but it has the sonic hallmarks, right? It has like the Ural.
Yes.
It has like
clothes. It has the clothes.
It has the clothes, and it has like maybe
tortured
the visual.
Singer.
That heroin imagery.
Yep.
Like
remember. Look, let's admit that there is a fashion trend in high fashion, as Toussaint knows, the fashion school expert here on the show. Heroin chic.
Yeah. Well, look at Shannon Selberg's band Post Cows was called the Heroin Sheiks, which I think is amazing but it's sheiks like the Sheikh of Arabia or something along those lines, like that kind of thing. But like the fashion part of it can't be discounted, because again, that didn't come from Mark Arm and Tad Doyle weren't sitting around and be like, hey, it'd be cool if we get some models to models of flannel. They would that would be absurd. Nobody was thinking about that, but because it was happening as a youth oriented flashpoint in history, people jumped on. Kate Moss. Right? Like, look at all. I mean, that's a different show if we want to get into that. And I don't even know if I'm qualified, but I was there. I was there. And, like, it was surreal how, like, so many other aspects of things, like, jumped up. Like, commercials. And, again, commercials are so, like, self-aware now. And now they're being done by people from our generation. So they're all surreal and, like, whatever to try to get people's attention. But that's when they first started seeing, like, commercials trying to capitalize on, like, grunge or what then became alternative. And again, alternative to what? Because it went to cultural paradigm. What is an alternative to? That's like the big question, especially, in The Wrestler, the Mickey Rourke character is like sitting there with Marissa Tomei and be like, and they're listening to Rat. And they're like, oh man, music was so good before that Cobain kid. He doesn't say kid, by the way. Ruined everything. He does not say kid. But I love that scene for so much because it's like that's what a lot of those dudes were thinking and saying. Mm-hmm. Where like they were because what they saw is that like they now weren't it wasn't music for them.
Well, but this is my theory why. Hear me out.
I'm ready.
A lot of the people that make it are really trying to make it. That means that what you're creating isn't art, so to speak. You're just trying to figure out what's hot, and you're playing what's hot.
Yeah.
If Van Halen riffs are what's hot, I'll play Van Halen riffs forward, backwards, every which way possible. I'll learn all the solos. We'll do all the things. The singer will hit the notes. We do the thing. We wear the thing. We do our hair this way, and that's just what we are. We're so cool. We're going to make it. It's like The Secret. Again, go back and watch Decline of a Western Civilization. Listen to those interviews with those up and coming, aspiring artists, they're not telling you how good their music is. They're not even telling you, hey, listen to my demo. They're just going, I'm going to make it because I have that drive.
You're talking about Decline 2, the second one.
Decline 2, sorry.
Yeah, because the first one's a punk rock one, the second one is the metal one. Yeah.
When you think about these people that are trying to make it and what they see as the decline, it wasn't a shift sonically for them. It was a shift in an aesthetic. They all say the same thing. Damn, had to go get a flannel shirt.
Yeah, right.
Changing your clothes was it. And for a lot of people, it was like, well, we recognize, certain things, and we go, that's the band I want to go listen to. If you came out wearing a Metallica shirt, playing a pointy guitar, people would look at you like you were nine kinds of an asshole. You could be playing the same exact music, but let's just be real about the scenes that we are in, right? If I came out wearing your outfit, people would look at me like I was nine kinds of an asshole for plenty of reasons. Why is this black guy trying to dress like Conan Neutron? But there is something to be said about the aesthetics that people tie to genres and they marry them, which is why I find it interesting that people don't say grunge is punk, because there was a moment where things that weren't 100 miles an hour was still punk music.
Yes, so that's a great example. And think about, look, the Minutemen were a punk rock band, right? Mm-hmm. And they were playing shows with Black Flag, and they were playing shows with Descendants, and they were playing and all of these bands didn't sound like each other. Okay, the idea was, and something that comes across all the time when I have people on from that era on my show, is that if you sounded like another band, you would get clowned on.
You had to be original.
Because people would be like, why are you trying to sound like Husker Du? Or why are you trying to sound like the Replacements?
And if we went to a show and those cats were there, what would we say? Fuck those dudes. Those are posers.
Posers. That's another term that is gone from the lexicon. Posers. Like the idea of again, selling out and posers. Those are the two things from the 90s that have lost to history. But it was huge. Because the idea being that this idea of being genuine, right? Because there was a lot of things that were happening at the time. So the idea of someone just adopting, like you're talking about, adopting the apparel and maybe even the girl. But they didn't have the goods. They were tourists at best and shameless opportunists at worst.
Mm. I mean, you have to. I just finished this piece.
It's a long time coming, man. I feel
not the grunge piece. I finished another. I write a bit.
I have known.
Write a bit.
This is known. Yeah.
I just finished this piece and it's called "Stakes is High," and I based it off De La Soul.
And the whole thing with they got in the news.
I took your line. So let me say this while Conan's on the show. The piece, hopefully it'll come out this week in Sublation, and the main theme of the piece is a line that Conan said while he was here, and he said it before. Is that when we can't get justice, we settle for catharsis. And I was writing about what I see as cathartic activities from people on left and right political spectrums. But one thing that I think is universal is an acceptance of underclass ideology. And I called it Stakes is High because I feel like De La Soul hit at such a perfect time where they smashed that acceptance of underclass ideology that was just kind of just attached to hip hop.
Yeah.
And there's a few bands that come through and they kind of smash your perceptions of what you think this music is and what punk can be. Because I love Bauhaus, and I don't just consider them a goth band. We were talking about Bauhaus. I want to say in the car the other day, you're like, sometimes they get a little deep in the vampire castle for me.
I was talking about Vinkus and how much I love the band Vinkus, our label mates, I might add. But they get a little bit too in the cave for my taste now and again. But I still mess with. But Bauhaus is great.
There's a reason why these people can cross over, in different realms and have a lot of punk fans and hardcore fans because they have some dope heavy riffs.
Oh, absolutely. Bauhaus is there's the reason why so many bands have covered them.
But what kills all these genres, and before we get to the 2000s, because everything's different in the 2000s. What kills all these genres is over capitalist production. One is good, 15's better.
Yes, and that's one of the reasons why we've invoked them. They've been invoked in the chat a bunch, and they're very near and dear to my heart. Fugazi. Fugazi is like the aberration of all aberration, like not just in the 90s, but in music, because they eschewed having an image of any kind. Like literally would not be photographed. Like Ian would not like take a single photograph for any press to use. It had to be all four of them. They like would not play corporate festivals. Admission $5, adorable by the way. And they would eject assholes pretty much. And they wouldn't market anything. Everything was word of mouth. But the music was so good, and Ian MacKaye was a famous dude. We can never discount that because I love those dudes, and I think that gets left out of the conversation. That Minor Threat though. Everybody knew Ian from Minor Threat, right? So he had the ability to do something crazy and amazing like Fugazi. But they influenced bands like Pearl Jam to be like, oh, there's another way to operate. I'm talking about operate. I'm talking about the business side of things, not musically, because again, there's not that much in common between Pearl Jam and Fugazi. But the idea of eschewing these capitalistic overtones and like being at these like, corporate venues that again are harder and harder to do. These days, like you have to like put more
smaller
work
and smaller now
because there's fewer and fewer of them, because that's again the gobbling up of all the smaller venues and mid-sized venues. Like it's very real, and it has not stopped. If anything, it's gotten worse during COVID. But yeah, but Fugazi was able to do what they do because they had the platform of being the new Ian MacKaye band. That's why they were able to do what they were doing. Now they were able to do it because they were fantastic and they were dedicated to their craft. They were astoundingly great musically, and they were like the opposite of like trend jumpers, right? But the thing that always gets left out of the conversation is that without that previously existing notoriety at that time and that place, it may not have hit in the same way that it had. Now we can argue whether that'd be good or that'd be bad, but Fugazi was out there being an aberration when like the Lollapalooza-ization of the music world happened, which is to say, and again, Perry Farrell, I'm not trying to like make it like a moratorium on like Lollapalooza, Perry Farrell, Jane's Addiction, any of that stuff. I'm just saying that like these package tours, which like that begat, what Coachella has become, all of these other things, and it just being like festivals that like really have little to do with the music these days, but they still have 75 bands, and then you have like in like tiny 6-point type at the bottom, like maybe like the working bands that are under there. It's Fugazi issued all of that, and what I find disappointing is how many proclaimed leftists have no idea who Fugazi is. Yet we'll be like, yeah, but Days of the New have some good songs. I'm like, no, they don't. Like you need to dig deeper. Like you need to dig. It's like being like, look, can I make a corollary? It's like everyone wants to get like the reading curriculum along of like, oh well, let's debate Marx and this and that, whatever. That's the equivalent of saying like, yeah, but I really think Lawrence O'Donnell like says it best. What? Are you kidding? Those aren't even the same things, man.
Leave Days of the New alone.
I'm just saying, dude, Days of the New to Fugazi? Like, come on. Like,
I don't know. I feel like you aren't in this scene, but when me and Cindy were touring like hardcore, whenever we'd hit like that good heartland of America, so Days of the New, the singer had a horrible meth problem. I think he still does.
Oh, really? That's too bad.
And the rest of the band formed another band called Tantric. And, they were doing this thing.
Okay.
And this is so if you were in a band that probably had a deal and maybe a hit, you can still get a booking agent. And what your booking agent does is they'll get you a gig.
Yeah.
But to pay for you, the promoter will make the other bands pay to get on and play with you. Yeah. And we would always play with these dudes that like had just played with Tantric. They like sold tickets. Like, yeah, we just played with Tantric. I was like, oh, so like, am I supposed to be impressed with that? Fucking. Yeah.
Look,
Like-
and that's like, I don't know why I'm picking on Days of the New, other than the fact that I find them uniquely mediocre. And I'm not saying that everybody needs to be a Fugazi too, because again, Fugazi got to be Fugazi by being Fugazi. But
Watch
they also
Fugazi live. There's some footage of them live on the internet.
one of my top 5 shows ever is a Fugazi show, and actually 2 other.
Was it Ian MacKay? Did you have Ian MacKay on?
I've had Ian on. I've had Guy Picciotto on recently. I've had Brendan on. Only person I've had on is Joe Lawley. Then I can complete my punch card and get a $5 refund.
Brendan was at. Does he live in L.A.?
No, Brendan lives in. They all live in D.C. He just played drums for Fake Names, I think, out there, which is
Someone
Bad Religion.
from Fugazi was at one of the Godflesh shows.
That doesn't surprise me. Brendan's a.
I want to say it was him.
I showed him Back to the Future for the first time. Like, people in the comments think I don't know Fugazi. Like, motherfucker, I know what their sleep numbers are.
I don't.
I'm not even kidding. But like, I'm just saying that, like, if you want to talk about like digging, and I'm not even saying everybody needs to like dig deep in music or this particular kind of music, whatever. I'm just saying that thinking that you know everything there is about heavy music because of, like Stained or something is like that equivalent, where it's like you are barely scratching the surface. And like, that's fine. But like, again, everything's been balkanized to this point that people don't even think about it that way. They just know who they know.
Well, I think that also changes. Like the 2000s for me is a different year, because by the time you get to the late 90s and all the grunge guys that are alive and not super strung out, I don't know, they don't really die till the 2000s anyway, outside of Cobain. The bigger names.
Yeah, there's a couple, but it's not as common.
The bigger names in the genre. There's a lot of reproduction of the sound.
Yeah, it's a copy of a copy. And then it comes copy of a copy of a copy.
And then when you get to the package tours that you're talking about, like Lollapalooza, which kind of runs its course in the mid 90s.
Yeah.
As far as a traveling tour. When you get to pop punk and ska, that's an interesting time, because again, now we're talking about the good times economically. And you're also talking about a time when younger people have an access to credit that they didn't have before.
Yeah, that was like one of the central tenets of that one piece that you did, and it's a great point that hasn't really been discussed, in the fact that why were these things? Why was there a swing revival? I don't know, but I was there and it happened. It happened. I was as surprised as anyone.
When you think about why these things happen and why they persist and why certain shit goes a certain way and other things don't go another way, like you kind of have to pull back and start looking at everything. And whenever I do these pieces, one of the first things I look at is, what could you buy with $1?
Sure.
Which is a real thing you can look up. And then I look at, home values. I look at, interest rates. I'd look at the availability of credit, because a lot of that the 90s was a time when deregulation is good times for a lot of people, And when you get to 2000,
NAFTA was sold as like, this is going to be fantastic for America. It's going to be the best thing that ever happened. And anyone that knew anything about trade was like, it won't. It will not be good.
Yeah, there were people going,
no,
this is
no,
bad. Like, what are you talking about? I just sold my house and I bought a bigger one. And yeah.
But everybody was like, no, everyone's going to be prosperous. We're all going to be doing great. And this, and yeah, okay.
Well,
sure.
Some people sold a bunch of records, but there's a difference between, I was having this conversation with Pascal the other day. Fuck you money, as Bertram Cooper calls it, which is my new favorite term. And you did okay for that time in your life.
Yeah, no, definitely. You want the FU money for sure. But by the way, and I got called out for talking trash about Coachella. I'll say nice things about Coachella when they book Conan, Neutron, the Secret Friends, and give me that money. All right, then we're good.
When your name is this thick on the flyer,
I'm talking
you
like
just made fuck you money.
Yeah, 48-point type at least, not about
48-point type. Fuck you money. As someone that knows how that shit works inside at festivals that big,
yeah.
Oh yeah.
Like, in the words of Cyndi Lauper, money changes everything. And I wish it didn't. Don't get me wrong. If we could live in some world where it was an actual meritocracy and like that'd be wonderful. But we don't live in that world. So you have to advocate for what
money
you want.
isn't? someone made a comment about have fun to have the Eve 6 guy on here. I know Third Eye Blind.
Yeah.
It's not fuck you money. That's a lot of money.
No. Yeah.
Fuck you money is when you can have a drug problem and still have a house.
Word. Yeah, no. That's real.
You know who has fuck you money? Everybody in the Grateful Dead.
Yes. Oh my God. Can I just say, as someone who worked at Tower Records in Berkeley for years, like, if I had any goodwill towards the Grateful Dead and the attendant like spin-offs and cinematic universe that was with them, it was destroyed completely by that job. And seeing all these trust fund hippies come in and like, oh, you got those Phil Lesh, blah, 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 blah. Oh my God, just multiple bullets.
What's the biggest show at the Bill Graham from a money perspective every year? Fish.
Yeah, of course it is. There's a documentary on that dude on like one of these. I'll never watch it.
That's the one you won't watch.
I don't care.
That's the fucking one you won't watch.
I can't mess with jam bands.
Documentaries are the worst people ever.
I cannot watch jam. I don't care. I mean, jam bands, extremely not my thing. Peace and love in my heart for the people that get something out of it, but I can't stand it, man. It's not for me.
Well, as you know, living at Soundwave, there was quite a few of those people that recorded there.
Yeah.
That became my neighbors.
Yeah, I'm sure it was great hearing them just noodle aimlessly for hours and hours. But again, it's not about my personal animus, right? Like we're trying to like track these lines.
But look, I think it's the overproduction of the sound that kills the music. I think we both agree on that. And I think by the time we get to the 2000s, for every genre of music,
yeah,
you can copy something note for note, look for look,
right?
And no one's going to say boo. Not one person said, "Why would I want to listen to Blink 182 when I already have Green Day?"
Yeah, exactly. Or
no one said that. It was like, give me.
You could have said with the Green Day and like the Buzzcocks too, but like, the Tool was invoked in the chats, which is a terrible sentence to say, but like Tool is a good example of a band that they did a thing, became known doing a thing, and they went deeper and they went the artist route of like, well, we're gonna do this, and you're welcome to come along with us.
They couldn't do that now. Only can happen in the 90s.
There is no possible way the Tool would be at the level they're at now if they hadn't had that. And they were great videos. And honestly, I went back and reassessed that was it Undertow record, and I was like, oh, it sounds like the Melvins with a different singer.
It fits to me. It fits what's hot. Again, when we talk about grunge, no one ever throws Tool in there.
I don't. To be clear, I don't mean that as an insult. I was like, oh wow, this is incredibly accessible when you think about like what Tool became, which is like hey, we're gonna be like Gen X King Crimson. Okay, cool.
Someone said Helmet. I think Helmet gets thrown in there as well. But Helmet also has a foot for, and I don't think it's a purpose foot. You interviewed Paige Hamilton from Helmet. They have a foot in nu metal for some odd reason.
They were kind of like Helmet and Faith No More both sort of like brought a lot of influence to like the nu metal crowd without being nu metal. And Buzz Osborne is like, yeah, you got a lot to answer for, Patton, when he says it to him all the time regarding like the nu metal thing and how everyone loves Faith No More and whatnot. And it's a shame because like I think Helmet, I mean, to this day when we're on tour, all the band's like, oh, they're doing like in the meantime kind of thing there. Okay, all right, it's like it's pervasive, and there's something. I saw Helmet actually with Melvins in '97, I think. And first of all, it was very clear who was there to see which band, to be clear. Because everyone there to see Helmet had a backwards baseball cap on. They had like, the freaking like No Fear t-shirts. And like, I was like, oh man. Like, and it like could not have been more of a different crowd. But I mean, that's not to say anything about Helmet's music because you don't get to choose your audience. Believe me, if Tool got to choose their audience, I'm sure they would. It would not necessarily be who shows up at their shows. One of the worst audiences I've ever been to, by the way.
I've heard that before about Tool.
It's like just.
I've heard that before.
And I think they're fantastic people, and I think they're incredible artists and musicians, and one of the worst audiences that I've ever been in, including Marilyn Manson at the peak of his power. Tool audience was worse, and that's saying a lot.
Look, no new metal can exist without Pantera.
Sure. I don't disagree with that at all.
I think most of that shit, as much as people want to go, oh, it's Faith No More, it's Anthrax and Public Enemy. It's like, nah, it's Pantera.
It's look, I'm not the subject matter expert for new metal, other than the fact that I can tell you right now that like the generation after me that's out and playing right now, bands like my friends in Chat Pile, right? Love that stuff. Not all of it. They love certain things. Like Korn, that first record, like everyone loves that first Korn record. And it is seen as the music, rather than it being the directionless rage that they were trying to capitalize on and sell to suburban white kids. And
isn't that what grunge kind of is?
No.
Or is it directionless sadness?
Well, it was, yeah, the exact emotion may not be the same. It's a similar principle, I think, is what you're getting at. And of course, because they've been doing it for years. But Korn, at least the first Korn record, completely rehabilitated now. Except for people that are like our age, are like, no! And like, they got a lot of thoughts about it. But I'll tell you what, I'll take Korn 20 times a week and twice on Tuesdays if we're talking about Limp Bizkit or something.
Yeah, I never really got into those dudes, man.
And that's where, and I love that, like, when that stuff came out, that's when John Reese made Hot Snakes, where he was like, I'm kind of done making aggressive music. And he's like,
I like that.
What?
Hot Snakes. Yeah, that's a dope band.
Hot Snakes are the business, man. That's
the guys from Botch. Isn't somebody from Botch in Hot Snakes?
No,
These Snakes are Arms.
These Snakes are Arms. It's different snakes. Yeah.
Yeah, different snakes. Sorry.
When I bring up Chat Pile, which, by the way, that's a perfect example of a band doing their exact thing. Finding success. They're incredibly successful right now. Their star is just like, and it couldn't happen to nicer dudes. And it's not that they change what they do at all. It's just that whatever, they're having a moment. They're hitting the zeitgeist. And I play with tons of bands. I see tons of bands. I have them on the show that are fantastic. And being great will only get you so far.
Ooh, say it again for the people in the back.
Being great will only get you so far. And nobody wants to hear that on the left, because we all like, oh, no, if everything was equal, then nope. Luck is a huge part of it.
Timing.
I
mean, a lot of this, again, if Nirvana...
My luck is terrible, and so is my timing. That's why I'm sitting here talking to you, Jason. Oh, God. Somebody just brought up in the chat when Vanilla Ice went new metal. I do remember that. That was an embarrassing moment in history.
That's, if you're chasing something, I said this the other day, if you're chasing something, you're always 2 years behind.
Exactly. Don't bother.
If Nirvana comes out with Nevermind in 89, doesn't hit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no. I mean... And when was Bleach? I think was Bleach 89? It might have been
88, 89, yeah.
Which I guess this is the time that 89, June 15th, 1989. Crover, again, who plays drums for me, like he's on a few of those records, which is hilarious because every review was like, yeah, it's like a Poppy Melvins. Because they weren't there yet. You had like Love Buzz, which is actually a Shocking Blue cover, and About a Girl. And those are the two things that were like, oh, okay, so there's like a pop sensibility to this. That's interesting. And then that, Nirvana was like still young as a band then. But if they had been like 2 years further along, they would have been the Pixies.
Ooh.
So beloved by true heads, everyone at the record shop will be their favorite band. But you ain't gonna be in Moulin Rouge. Remember Moulin Rouge, that Nirvana song? I hate that.
Dude, again, I can't stress enough. Like we're saying, timing, luck. Your time as a band. I don't think you can write those songs until you can't be who you are today, writing the songs you're writing now, if you didn't have everything that's happened in your life.
Oh, yes.
All those great tours, those shitty tours. Playing to nobody.
Sometimes the same tour, by the way.
Conan, all the time the same tour.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's a little different for you now, but
but ain't that much different. We're still fighting for the
You have to go through. Me and you can't be talking here today with this many people watching us.
Yeah.
If we didn't walk through the things that we walked through. And I do think timing was just kind of perfect for this music and for this area.
Yeah.
They just had such a vibrant scene that you could just start picking all these bands because they were fucking active. If you ever go to an area where there's active bands, Atlanta or Athens rather.
Yeah.
That Athens scene doesn't happen because someone, I think there's something going on here. When you get one band and you see that there's like 8 more, you're going to sign everybody.
Well, sure. I mean, like
there's gold in them thar hills.
Bill was talking about like all that Elephant Six stuff, like all, it's super interesting how that has happened. San Diego had a moment for like a little bit, mostly centered around Rocket from the Crypt, but like you had other bands that were around that were like lesser known that, 3 Mile Pilot, everyone thought 3 Mile Pilot was going to be like the next big thing. And then you're like, really? 3 Mile Pilot? I mean, I like them, but you think this is going to be like mall big? It's not going to be, man.
And then that A&R got fired and nobody got their support.
And I love 3 Mile Pilot, right? And then Pinback has done well. Don't get me wrong. Like, there's plenty of like bands that will do well and will parlay that into something. And sometimes it's even good bands, and that's great. But it's not like how it was. Because here's the thing: you get something like what happened in the early '90s. It's like the Borg from Star Trek. Like the thing with the Borg is like you would attack them. They would learn the attack and they would adapt to it, and they would not be able to use that same attack. And you have to use a different attack, right? Mm-hmm. And that's basically what the music business is all about. They adapted to what was retroactively referred to as grunge. These freaks, nerds, and weirdos getting let in. They adapted to rap by sort of downplaying Public Enemy and bringing the gangster rap thing into place. And it happens again and again where the machine adapts, and it adapts to be the least dangerous thing, that it has the most appearance of danger that you can market to people. And it happens to this day. Like, look, I got nothing against Phoebe Bridgers. I couldn't pick a song out of a lineup, frankly. But that whole like Tempest in a Teapot of like she broke the guitar on the show and was it authentic breaking and whose guitar was and this and that. I'm like, I would literally have to try to care less about any of this. I don't care. I just don't care. And listen, I'm not one of those people that like doesn't listen to new stuff. I do listen to new stuff, and there's plenty of great music out there. My friend Donna plays in the band Junah, DJUNAH. This last record has been connecting with people on a much larger level, and it's beautiful to see because she's just a freak of the highest order, and I mean that as a compliment, like a musical freak, right? Mm-hmm. And sometimes the freaks get let in, but the machine will always be attempting to adapt if you are trying to deal with the machine. So that goes back to the Fugazi thing, right? Fugazi decided we're going to build our own architecture, our own infrastructure, and we're gonna issue all this stuff that we don't want to deal with. And again, they were able to do that because they were Fugazi first and foremost, but also because they had the platform of being the new and final Ian MacKaye band, and that doesn't happen very often. Right? At the Drive-In could have pulled that off. Which again, who remembers At the Drive-In now? Everyone thinks of Mars Volta, and that's a different thing. That was like those dudes going like deep into the artistry side of it and deciding to make some headache-inducing prog records. Peace and love in my heart. Great players and peace and love, but yeah, not for me. And there hasn't really been like a cultural flashpoint since then, but any of these cultural flashpoints will not hit the same way as it did in those early 90s because the machine's already adapted. The machine's ready to hand out a 360 deal. Mm-hmm. The machine's ready to like...
You know what? All these people that love saying they want to be independent are ready to take them.
Hell yeah, sure. Look, man, I've been in this game for a long time. If somebody was like offering a big old check and I was like, do I have to change anything? Because that's not to invoke the Melvins for 1,000th time. Melvins have the best story for being on a major label because basically they're Kurt Cobain's favorite band. There's no Nirvana without Melvins, right? So they get a deal on Atlantic, the Melvins, and they proceed to make at the time 3 of their weirdest records that they have ever made because they were like, oh yeah, you like what we do, huh? Well, here's what we're doing, and they dutifully put them out. Exactly. Sleep's another good example. You don't have to become part of that system. It's just that most people do because they succumb to the pressure and because they were like, well, I do want people to like it. And you have people in your ear, yada, yada, blah, 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 talking about this, talking about that other thing. But there's a lot of it where it's like, dude, that last Shudder to Think record is nuts. And the fact that somebody was like, I think Hitlicker should be the first song on it. Really? Even the band doesn't think that. But the Next Fresh t-shirt was a pretty decent sized hit with one of the weirdest videos you've ever seen. And it's a weird song. It just like kind of goes for a while and Craig Wedren does this really circular vocal thing. Like musically, it's like, this is not like the first thing you would think of for like a radio hit. But again, the freaks had been let in. And before they learned that they could manufacture their own pseudo freaks. And the machine always is learning. And the
I don't
machine,
think they have to manufacture it anymore. I think
they don't because
because
again, go back to the selling out and the poser arguments and how why did those disappear from the lexicon? Because if you get artists that are willingly able to be co-opted, you don't need to make your own.
Mm-hmm.
People will volunteer.
Van Jones. Everybody's Van Jones.
Everybody. That's hilarious, but I hope that's not where we're ending because that's depressing. But it's true. It's completely true.
And good night.
And everyone's Van Jones. Oh,
no,
man.
like seriously.
Van Jones used to be a real deal. That's true.
Let's be honest.
But then, like, okay, if the answers are, this is a good point. Being a poser beats working for a living in the comments. Yeah, it does. So that's why people, because at this point, the idea of being able to beat back the almighty algorithm and pull a chat pile, right? And to like do exactly what you do and have it hit with people and connect with people in a way that circumvents the algorithm, that gets out into the world, right? Well, that's awesome, but most people are not going to have that option. So if you really live for it, of course, if someone's being like, hey, we want you in this Apple commercial. All right. Yeah, why not? You know? Who's going to yell at me about selling out? Some kid from the 90s? You know?
When I worked at the Great American Music Hall, do you know how many people that would show up and we wouldn't even know who they were and they'd sell the place out?
Yeah.
And I'd sometimes, you get to talk to the artist. And I was like,
used to call that pitchfork music, by the way. Oh, it's pitchfork music.
Pitchfork music? Oh, that's a good term. I used to be like, well, what happened? I've never heard. And I'd say, like, I've never heard of you. Like, how'd you get a bus? And they'd say the same thing every time. I was on an Apple commercial.
Yeah,
back when Apple commercials were a thing,
and we're even past that now. Yeah, that's literally because that for a while there, that was the way that you could reach people. It's like, it wasn't just like, oh, so and so was in a such and such commercial. It's like, oh, so and such they were in a such and such commercial, and it was a cool thing. And again, crazy because that is not how we came up. That was sort of like
Conan and everybody here listening. Do we know who started Patreon?
I know the answer.
It may not have been an Apple commercial, but it sure was close. Do you know that dude personally? Because he's from the Bay.
No, but yeah, like that article about like, hey, we went on tour and it cost us all this money. Yeah, you stupid son of a bitch.
Who the fuck does that?
Jesus Christ, what's wrong with you?
Let's shut up now before all of a sudden. Why is it my Patreon go through?
I know, right?
All of a sudden my Patreon's not going through. I don't know why.
Well, don't worry. First of the month already happens. We already got ours, so we got a full month.
I didn't realize it was that guy from that band.
Yeah. Well, and how did are we just not going to invoke their name?
They're called, don't tell me.
Pomplamoose.
Mom, I said don't tell me.
But they made like these they were doing these covers, right? They were doing the covers. It was the dude and the chick, and they were like doing these covers. It was very pleasant, consonant, like female vocals.
That was the thing back then.
Oh
Lilting
still
voice.
Still is if you watch any movie preview, they just turned it minor key, and it's rough because like I don't know, man. I try to like have a lot of my attitude tends to be like, oh, that's not for me these days because I just can't be angry all the time. I just can't do it. Much like Danny Glover, I'm getting too old for this shit. But when I saw that stuff, I'd be like, ooh.
So for those that don't know, the guy that started Patreon started as a music site. We were getting, I don't know if you were getting them. I was getting messages from like, hey, maybe you should look into Patreon.
Oh yeah,
It's a great way to, get revenue while you're not touring and da-da-da-da-da. So there was this guy that had a band like Conan's talking about. They had a song on I think a Lavino commercial.
Yeah, that sounds right.
And they got a large chunk of money, and then they booked a tour, and then they bought new gear, a trailer, a lighting rig, and I think they took a tour manager on the road and a merch person.
It's like all they knew about from touring, they learned from Almost Famous.
Stop talking about our Patreon boss. He
saying.
made some small errors.
Were they small though?
They blew through the money because when you're even if you're a new band on tour, or a baby band as they call them, if you're a baby band on tour, even if you have something that hits, it takes a while for you to hit everywhere, and not everybody knows about you. So you have to have like a PR company. I don't think they had a PR company that was helping, and even then, that doesn't help all the time. I remember I was out with a band that had we were on I was just tour managing, but they were on Drive Time Radio. Mm-hmm. And we were doing in radio things. We were doing in stores, and still there were shows that nobody showed up to.
Because there's it doesn't mean anything. Like it means something, but it doesn't mean anything.
You're right. And so, dude, he felt the Pomplamoose for years was an example of what not to do when you get a little bit of money.
And I can put this a little more charitably than just me being mean, is the fact that from my perspective as someone who is just like yourself, I've toured and made records for the last 23 years. And you learn what works and what doesn't, and what you should and shouldn't spend your money on, and what isn't important when the bottom line is really severe. People that have not done it, that have not read the books and stuff about, they haven't read Get in the Van with Henry Rollins. They haven't read Our Band Could Be Your Life. They wouldn't necessarily know from that. And so they're going off of what they thought was their best effort calculation of what it is. And to be explicitly clear, there are no depictions of working touring bands that are not like temporarily embarrassed millionaires for music in popular culture. Does not exist.
The only thing I ever watched, and Conan warned me, and it's the only time, and he said this with such sincerity. He goes, I was like, hey, that movie Sound of Metal is supposed to be pretty good. And Conan goes, I think it's one of the best, whatever year it was, when he's like, I think it's the best movie of the year. This is the year it came out. And you go, but I think it's going to hit you a little hard.
Yeah. I said, for folks like us, it's a horror movie, is what I said.
No, you said you specifically is going to hit you a little hard.
Yeah, and you know why now, right?
Yeah. I watched that movie. I was like, there's no way in the world I've never run into the person that wrote this. Yeah. There's no way in the world. The guy and the chick and living in the thing and it's fucking too close to home.
And I'm not, and to be clear, I'm not saying that like that's the only path, or like the way of the Neutron is the only way. I'm not saying any of that stuff. I'm just saying that it was grossly inefficient in a way that this tour that the Pomplamoose guys did, that it was actually genius, because he wrote an article about it, and every dude on the internet, because let's be clear, it's probably dudes, was like, these jerks, they don't know anything about touring. What do they know about partying or anything else? TV party reference, by the way. And again, I actually like to think that he sort of like did that on purpose, because the dude clearly knows his marketing. Right?
Look, we always talk about
got everyone all worked up. Yeah.
If anybody cracked the code, and I think this is all accidental, I would love, and I'll never get this opportunity. I would love to sit down with this dude in a room and just hear him tell the story, because I'm sure he'd be like, yeah, and these fucking podcast guys came out of fucking nowhere, and they all started signing up, and I was like, what are you? The initial service was you can charge people a monthly fee, and you could give them music. Yeah.
Here's a song I recorded on my acoustic guitar. Here's like, something us dicking around backstage or something,
And I always looked at it, I was like, this is stupid, because why would anybody care about my nobody band?
Yeah.
And who ended up benefiting from Patreon more than anybody? These up and coming podcasts.
Yeah.
Chapo Trap House.
True success story.
And, dude was like, go look at any band on Patreon. Good luck finding one.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, you have like...
There's some legit bands on there. I think
there's a couple and a couple that make
them
them work. I mean, for me, the idea of like the band as like content creation thing is horrible. I despise that idea. Like, I'm not like that's like Tuesday at the Blues Bar stuff. Like, that's not anything I'm interested in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not like, oh, you have to make a new song every month for your... No, I make records, man.
That was my whole thought about it. I was like, I don't think any musician has the ability to put out that level of music, and have it be decent. And
some people can do it. Look at like, is Robert Pollard from Guided by Voices on there? If he was, he would be the perfect guy, because he cranks out these songs, he cranks out these records like it ain't nothing, right? I know Creston from Harvey Milk is on there, and he has like a dedicated audience that are interested in like what he's up to, and good for him. And like, if that works for you, awesome. That is so far afield from how I operate. Like, I would grab a hoe and start planting seeds in like the field before I go do that. Go play guitar at the camera. Nope.
Go play guitar at the camera.
No, but it's not me. And that's because like when I do something, look, I don't even like having demos. Like, people, like, the new thing is like you have the record and you have like the demos that come with it, right? No, you not for me,
Well,
Hell no.
that's when Metallica hated Napster, right? Because they were actually leaking demos of songs that were
unfinished stuff.
Like,
and I
you hearing that?
That's actually like something that makes me like them more, because it's like I get it, because like although that some kind of monster that record that drum sound, I'm like, that's the drum sound you came up with?
Saint Anger.
Ping, ping, ping. It's like, that's the one? You worked on this for months. That's what you decided. Okay.
Someone re-recorded that record, and this kid, man, he redid everything.
Dude, was that the one where it's like it's like the Master of Puppets? Well, and there's the other way around too, where it's the Saint Anger drum sound on Master of Puppets.
Don't do that. I saw someone do that.
It was.
This is where we are with music. You want to know what? You know, killed grunge. This is where we are with music today. Joe Elliott said this of Def Leppard, and it fucked me up. He said, "It's 2023, and you're still talking about me. And I started this band in 1977. He goes, who performing right now? What young band right now are you going to be talking about in 2065?
Yeah, Greta Von Fleet? I don't think so. I don't even want to talk about him right now.
Nobody. It's too balkanized, to your point.
Yeah,
music is too balkanized. The one thing about why this music was allowed to get as big as it was, and this is my opinion, I don't know if you agree, is because Nirvana was on 120 minutes. It was on alternative radio. It was also on Headbangers Ball.
Yeah.
And they also toured with heavier bands, not for that long, because they were headlining pretty quick.
But then they were bringing along bands like Sonic Youth and Butthole Surfers and stuff. And they were making a ecosystem around them, which is what, and I'm interrupting your point to make a point, but like what more bands that do have that platform could be doing. And they choose to not do it. They choose to be like, well, let's go with whoever the label wants. No, I mean, like, Nirvana was like, no, we want to have Beat Happening on this show. We want to have Fugazi on this show. We want to have, like the Jesus Lizard. We want to have like these bands that we like, that we want our audience to know.
And now you get to, even if you hate it, you get to dig something new. When bigger bands take out shitty bands like mine.
What does that do with the quality? It's a level of fame when it's unknown bands, we'll say.
Yeah, right? it's you're saying, here, check this out, right? Yeah. Or maybe I'm just a t-shirt band, as Van Halen said. But do you know the story about Loverboy, the band Loverboy? Yeah. Do you know that story?
I think so.
Not Loverboy. I'm sorry, Autograph.
Oh, okay, yeah, all right.
The band Autograph is a bunch of studio musicians who were jamming on the weekend, and one of the guys knew David Lee Roth and said, hey, I'm jamming with my buddies. Check out this demo.
Yeah.
David Lee Roth heard it and he was like, this is dope. We need an opener for this tour. He's like, dude, we're just jamming on the weekends. We don't have a record deal, nothing. He goes, I don't care. Gives it to
Let's do
Eddie.
it.
Eddie calls up the main guy who did the Seventh Heaven theme song, you know, the autograph guy. And Eddie goes, hey, we want you to open the tour for Van Halen. I think it was like 1984. So this is 1984 Panama Jump Van Halen.
Yeah.
And he goes, well, why us? And Eddie goes, we need a t-shirt band. And he goes, what's a t-shirt band? Oh, somebody that nobody gives a shit about. So they buy t-shirts before we come on stage.
Wow. By the way, I volunteer for that. Fine. That's how we're going to beat a band is through merch. But anyway,
the Autograph is the band that has the song "Turn Up the Radio."
Oh yeah, there you go. Hopefully, don't get demonetized for this.
Oh yeah. Let me not say it.
Don't worry, it wasn't that close.
Oh, dude, they demonetized a show we did about a freaking comic. Let me say that before we go. Thank you guys for hanging out with me and Conan and listen to us yell at each other. You just witnessed what it's like to be around Jason and Conan in any capacity in any part of the world. This is what it's like to be around us. But thank you guys for hanging out. If you like what you see here on This Is Revolution, drop a super chat, because literally so many of our episodes right now are being demonetized. And it's episodes where we're not saying anything crazy. I haven't dropped an N-word in a long time. Just for that reason. I don't know what it is. But our last two live streams are not letting us. So we're going to be talking about Star Wars tomorrow, which is why I'm wearing my Star Wars shirt.
That's right. It is May 4th tomorrow. Yeah.
We'll be Dr. Michael Harris and Chris Catrone are going to be on, and we're going to be talking about the importance of grand narratives for the left.
I'm rewatching Rebels right now. That's my
high five in the camera. High five in the camera. Can we agree that Rebels is kind of the best?
It's kind of the, and I have like, my thing is I'm on this treadmill. I got my tactical assault weight vest on, and I'm just like, I want something that is going to be enjoyable. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to rewatch Rebels, and it is delivering.
When I was staying with my son and his mom, me and my son were watching Star Wars stuff in chronological order.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And he actually was so into the prequels because they're so bright and colorful.
Yeah.
And I didn't think he'd like the original movie, so we were watching it in order. And so when the cartoons came up, he doesn't like Clone Wars, loves Rebels.
Clone Wars delivered on that last season big time. That one that was like the delayed season.
Yes.
Like the last season is like so good. But Clone Wars, it's great but uneven. Rebels is pretty solid the whole way.
Rebels, I love Rebels.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I love Rebels.
So this is a preview of the deep nerdery you can get if you tune in tomorrow, apparently.
Andor is going to be a lot of talk about Andor.
Yeah. I love all that stuff.
I think I might have enough money to pay for my Disney subscription, which they sent me a message that said, hey, your card isn't working. I was like, what? What are you talking about? What card?
Oh.
These aren't the droids you're looking for.
Yeah, exactly. Just use the Force on them. Yeah, exactly. Oh, no. We already paid you.
What do you mean?
The check's in the mail.
This is the wrong Jason.
I'm an influencer. You should give me a free month.
Yeah. Who do I have to blow to get a free? Charles, thank you so much.
Nice.
Thank you so much, Charles. This is huge. Now we can
pay for Disney Plus.
Now we can get Disney Plus, and and now the world's a happier place that I can know exactly what Chris Catrone is going to talk about.
Yeah, exactly. Like you can actually see this stuff rather than talking about what you think it might be like. Well, I think the Mandalorian finale went like this, but I don't know.
Yeah, they keep wanting to talk about Andor. I'm like, well, I haven't seen Andor, but in A New Hope, what we really need.
Yeah, just pivot back to the stuff you see. Yeah, it's good. It's a pro move.
The importance of Empire is.
Yeah, well, the thing about the stuff that I have easy access to is I got easy access to it.
Yeah, so I'm all ready to talk about, what I think we're going to talk about, and then I get an email in the thread of people inviting on the show, and they're like, Andor is very important. We should discuss Andor. I was like,
Andor is very good.
yeah.
But then
all I
again,
was thinking was like, you motherfucker.
My favorite of the recent Star Wars movies is the one written by my friend Gary Whitta. That's not why it's my favorite though, which is Rogue One.
Rogue One, and that's what Andor is based off, right?
Andor's a prequel of Rogue One. Yeah.
Is he part of that at all?
No. which we had him. We had him. He also did Book of Eli, if you know that movie.
Yeah, you had him on Movie Night.
We had him on Movie Night Extravaganza. We didn't push him on that because he was like, "Yeah, I'm not involved in that." I'm like, "Oh, okay, then we won't talk about it. Don't worry about it." I get the feeling that he would have liked to have been. I don't know. I would have too.
So someone says, "I would listen to Norm Finkelstein review The Phantom Menace." I would listen to that too. I think that'd be the funniest thing ever.
Yeah.
I was jealous, very jealous, that you had the dude that wrote and directed Heathers, because we did a whole show where we talked about Heathers.
I know, man. Michael Lehman came on. He's laughing at my jokes. He was a great guest.
And I was like, dude, you need to slide that guest over to
cool
me
as
real
hell.
quick.
I'll look it up.
I would love to kind of finish that discussion on the importance of JD.
Yeah, man. He went deep too. He was telling us like about casting stuff, and like it was cool, man.
That was the casting.
We did the letterbox one-liners, and he was laughing. He told a story about like Winona Ryder's monocle when she's writing, and it was like, this is the best show. Is this the best episode of this show ever?
I saw a little bit of that, and I was like, good for those guys. Sons of bitches.
Like,
there's no hate here.
Just trying to be happy. Yeah. Good for you.
Look, man, I am happy. There's no. Somebody said a comment about they were mad at a show we did about nuclear power, and that David Griscom should get mad at me about it. And I was like, of all the things that David Griscom is going to get mad at me about, it's going to be about college football, but it's not going to be about us disagreeing about something we have no power to enforce.
Yeah. Well, it's just like, I'm still kind of mad about Candlebox, but I don't sucks.
Yeah, I don't have too much hate in my heart. I think the most
exactly. A lot of that melted away, like when it was like, man, we got real ass problems.
Yeah.
I don't have time to be upset about this.
Look, I can't pay for Disney Plus, okay?
That's why people, again, dudes our age are on the internet mad about like new metal being rehabbed. I'm like, do you like where are you living that you have time to be mad about this?
I don't give a damn. Look, there's shit I don't like.
There's tons of stuff I don't like.
I just don't have to like it. But being mad at the motherfuckers for being successful, that's what I'm not.
Yeah. Fred Durst is living rent free in your mind, and that's a horrible sentence.
Give a damn. Like, I think people think that we be mad at shit. Like, look, man, I give a damn.
I don't care. Man,
apparently, recently somebody said some fucked up shit about us on Twitter and shit, and
everybody
wants to tell you when there's gossip.
Oh yeah. They get a screenshot. Here it is. Great.
And I'm like, I got mad for like 5 minutes, and I was like, like we had a call, and then we all were on the call, and like all the grown up of all of us came out. I was like, fuck that dude.
Yeah, I mean,
fuck him up the ass.
Look, I mean, if you're doing anything of note,
yeah,
there's always going to be someone that's going to be first on the contrarian train, and like sometimes maybe they have something substantial to say. Most of the time, not. It doesn't matter. There's plenty of stuff I don't like. You know what? Some years back, I was like, I'm going to let this go through me. I'm not going to. I don't want this sitting in me. This is not the kind of person I am. I'd much rather spend my time advocating for the things I love than getting down in the mud with this BS.
Here's what, guys? I am not a fan of most of the bands of this genre that we're talking about.
You're talking about grunge? You're talking about?
Yeah. You know who I really did like, and you and Conan introduced me to this cat, and I don't think Conan knew that I dug this band, is I like the Melvins. I always thought the Melvins were cool, and I got to meet Buzz touring with Conan.
That's right.
That was
which is wild because you met Buzz, but you didn't meet Dale, right? Isn't that right? Yeah, y'all were talking about baseball for
baseball and all kind of black shit. Yeah.
But the thing about the Melvins is they were before all that. They were before
Yeah.
for
I
like a good
I
portion.
think those motherfuckers are heavy. I think they're cool. I dig cats that just do their thing and don't change the name of the band to do something different.
Yeah, and then people want to talk about people getting mad. Whoo, when Melvins put out a record and it isn't like, Bullhead Part 7, which is all the time.
Yeah.
Everyone, I hate this. I'm going to buy 3 copies.
Someone asked me that someone interviewed me as this show's gotten bigger. So, more people know about my music.
Yeah.
And I got interviewed on a music show last year. And
shit, pass it my way, man.
Someone said, "You never want to interview me about music, you bastard." Someone said, so the guy said, "You live is very different than your recordings." And he goes, "I've been listening to your recordings, and these are like really cool, like post-metal stuff." He goes, "Do you think people would be upset if they saw you live and they were like, this is very different than what I've been listening to for the last year?" And I never thought about that. I was like, I guess maybe they'd be pissed, but they'll get over it.
Well, because making records is making records and playing live is playing live,
That's how I looked at it. But he was like, he made a good point. He was like, if I, bought this music expecting to hear you do these, 8-minute instrumental cuts, and you're sitting here doing 3-minute fucking rippers, I'd be a little pissed off.
Well, yeah, but unless you're Tool or something, no one's looking for that. You say you're looking for it, but
exactly.
Be checking their watch.
Oh,
How long
I did
they been
not
playing
make
this?
any of that music to play live.
Yeah, I mean, it's it's whatever. Like my favorite bands always kind of follow their own North Star. But I was before I ever played with Crover. Like Melvins were one of my favorite bands because you just never knew what to expect with them. And it was always interesting. It was always cool, but it's not going to be what you think it's going to be.
That's why I love Faith No More.
Faith No More is another great example.
Fishbone.
Yeah.
You don't know what you're going to get with these people.
Fishbone. The chat was going wild about Fishbone earlier on.
Fishbone had a moment in the mid 90s because they were on the Lollapalooza train.
Yeah.
And they were blowing everybody.
Because they're one of the most consistently badass live bands ever.
I mean,
so that said,
everybody.
None of the records come close to that live show, though. None of them.
I wish we could play music because I think that record. I look. That is a testament to the live show.
No, that live show is again they're like think about who they were playing with in those Lollapalooza shows.
But brother, Everyday Sunshine. That's like not what did Keith Morris say? They're doing 8 genres in the same song. Man.
Yeah, exactly. Nah, it's criminal how underappreciated Fishbone is.
Conan, you want to answer this? This is an important question. Even though it's not a super chat question, I think we're both going to acknowledge this. Conan, you want to give your answer on this? Just curious, do any of you distribute your own music through Bandcamp?
Hell yeah. That is, other than selling merch at the shows, that's the predominant source of income for the band.
Do you put it on Spotify too?
It's on all the things. I'm because here's how I look at it, right? Digital distribution these days, YouTube, Spotify, Deezer, whatever the hell it is, which, by the way, there is no such thing as ethical streaming. Does not exist as far as if you're talking about looking from perspective of music as a commodity. But if you look at it as a replacement for radio, which I do, which is to say that when people
which we
listen
were
to
never going to be on.
Damn right. Then it's something that will, Conan Neutron, The Secret Friends comes and plays at your town. Maybe you'll come check it out, buy a t-shirt, buy a record, whatever. It's a way to get people in. So if you look at it that way, which I do, and don't get me wrong, I still get those $50 every 6 months, like payouts or something along those lines. But with Bandcamp, when they got those Bandcamp days, that literally paid the rent, paid the power bill. When I was down during peak pandemic, and it was without Bandcamp, that would not have happened. I'm not saying we would have been homeless or anything, but I'm like, it was. I was like, what can I sell? What have we got in this room? I probably couldn't get anything for that.
Many guitars, yeah.
And Bandcamp, and the fact that everyone is all mad that Epic bought them and like was ready to be in the backlash. It's still the only game in town that remotely fairly compensates artists, because the money predominantly goes to the artist, and it matters. And I'm saying, even if you never play one of those digital files, if you buy the music, like say you get a record, like this is my favorite record of the year, man.
Mhm.
And they got it on Bandcamp, buy that record, because I guarantee you
dude,
that money makes a difference.
The Bandcamp stuff for this show, when I first started.
Oh, sure.
When I first started doing stuff and I was releasing music, Bandcamp was huge for me to keep it going, because I think, oh God, I guess I'll be real honest on this show. I was kind of homeless when I finished a double record. I was like staying at people's places, and I had enough space to record, and I was finishing up something. And I was able to finish it and put it out on Bandcamp, and I was surprised at the response.
It's direct relief. It's direct support.
It was a huge. I needed it. It helped me get down here, and
yeah, man.
Yeah, dude.
And we don't talk about it. It doesn't get talked about nearly enough, because nobody wants to talk about how down they are.
I can't put anything on Spotify because as you guys know, all the music you hear for the intros and for the video essays, all that stuff is music I make. So once I put it on Spotify,
then you're gonna get takedown requests for your own stuff.
I get takedowns for myself, and I have to fight with them to keep my own music up. So when I first started doing the show, I was playing music from my past band, Le Fin Absolute Demon. And
great band.
And now I can license Le Fin music to be played on TIR. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
There's a new feature that YouTube has.
Really?
So, and here's the kicker. I wouldn't get paid.
Of course not, because every one of these disruptions in the music world they talk about, every single one of them, aside from Bandcamp, make sure someone else gets more money. It's got nothing to do with paying the artist, ever.
And there's
ever.
Perfect for this show. And I was like, can't do it. I won't get paid. So I've flirted with the idea of putting some of the stuff that I've released out on Spotify.
Yeah.
But
the thing is, unless you've got so you have to get to a level where you have like a YouTube representative. Like you have someone from that company that like you can talk to as a human. Because if you talk to that computer, it ain't never gonna I got flagged for Conan Neutron's Protonic Reversal, the song by Conan Neutron and the Secret Friends that has clips of the show Conan Neutron's Protonic Reversal interjected into the Conan Neutron and the Secret Friends song. Conan Neutron was hit up by YouTube being like, the copyright owner has said that you can't do this. I'm like, really? It's funny you say that, because as the sole copyright owner, sole writer of literally everything, owner of all these rights, name in the show, name in the band, I assure you, you are mistaken. Please, then I had to keep appealing, and eventually it got to a human. And they were like, oh yeah, that's BS. We'll make an exception for that. I'm like, you better make an exception for that.
It's frustrating trying to fight. We had Pasquale was on here. And I want to say he wrote one of the songs on one of his band's platinum records, and he played it. Mm-hmm. And he got flagged on one of his
copyright owner said take this down.
And he had to show, and he was sending it. He's like, no, here's the proof. I wrote it. This is literally my ASCAP proof.
They don't care. It's got nothing to do with that though. It's all about. It started off with the whole diegetic music thing. There's like a Rolling Stone song playing in a freaking taxi in the background of like some scene where two people are talking, and somebody got the bright idea like, hey, we should get paid for that. That's what it came down to. And so that's what was asked for, and this is what you got. Which again, getting a takedown notice, Conan Neutron getting a takedown notice for the Conan Neutron the Secret Friend song on Conan Neutron's Protonic Reversal that has clips of Conan Neutron's Protonic Reversal in the Conan Neutron the Secret Friend song, and I own the rights for literally everything, and my name's in all of it.
Not when you sign up for that. We'll
And the
collect
computer's like,
revenues.
the copyright owner has. Man, I am the copyright owner, but it doesn't matter. That's not what it's
And
about.
have you ever seen at
It's
a
like
small
cops,
club? Have you
know?
ever seen at a small club a sting operation by ASCAP or BMI?
Oh, that's some rotten.
Have you ever
stuff,
seen it?
man. Yeah, I haven't seen it firsthand, but I know people that have seen it.
We saw one
Rotten.
in Fayetteville, North Carolina.
Yeah.
Ooh, they shut you. They sit there. What they do, if you have a band that plays cover songs,
Yeah.
and you don't, every venue has to pay
Yep.
a certain royalty fee to
Yep.
ASCAP and BMI, even if you want to play music in the venue. And if you don't do that, they come in, usually in smaller cities, you don't see it in big major metropolitan areas, and they wait all day. They just tally
they sit
all
there.
the covers you do, and they hit you with this like,
Here's
hey,
the bill.
$30,000 you owe us now. They shut venues down. And you're talking about Rolling Stones covers for money that they don't even care about.
Yeah, these multi-millionaire like
I don't know
geriatrics.
one band at that level that's sitting there filling out their BMI and ASCAP for their live show so they can get that check for, $1,200 at the end of a quarter.
Yeah, well, and that's what I'm saying. So what do I see from it on my side, right? I'll tell you, it's about $50 every 3 months. Wow, okay, that's a lot better than a lot of people are doing.
But you're not filling out your live performance.
No, man, that's
Well,
mob stuff.
See, fill out your live performance, you'll quadruple that.
Well, if we were playing, we haven't played since fall of last year. But yeah, I mean, like look, we could do a whole other show on some of this stuff. But the way that this flying circus of mine keeps operating is constantly working that merch hustle, man. There's always new T-shirts, there's new records, there's new stickers, there's this, that, the other thing. It looks like a freaking Etsy store half the time we're rolling around. But that's how we keep the freaking ship running, man. That's when I, and it's frustrating to me that like that is so internalized to not just the music world, but a certain part of the music world. That I see well-meaning folks that like when I'll do like more traditional media, they're oh, what can we do? I'm like, buy some stuff.
Yeah.
That's it. That's all you got to do.
I bring this up and people are talking about it. What's been happening is artists have been selling their catalogs. And as artists are selling their catalogs,
yeah, they got flat fee for it, and then it's owned by someone else, and they collect those royalties.
You ever hear the J.G. Wentworth? It's the same business model. Yeah. You have a settlement or an annuity or something that you get monthly, and you want your money now. They give you pennies on the dollar.
Lump sum settlement, pennies on the dollar. Yep, that's exactly what it is.
It's the same thing with the rights to your music. Hey, you have a big music catalog. We're going to buy it from you for maybe not pennies on the dollar, and we're going to try to monetize the hell out of this. Yeah, that means that we're going to put pressure on, BMI and ASCAP and give people bonuses to go out there and bankrupt small venues.
Yeah. It's mob practice is what it is.
Yeah.
And again, because the whole thing is like sharecropping anyway, right? With these services. I don't want to be like, the party poop or anything, but it is. I mean, like we've all decided collectively that we're going to rent music and we're going to pay the person who owns the farm for these sharecropping.
It's like you're preaching right now.
We like it. Say on.
Wow.
And it sounds dire. People get bummed out when I start talking about this, but I'm like, where's the lie for any of this? And so like, what's the curative measure? Well, you're not going to be like, hey, everybody, go to this streaming service. No, it's all the same. Like maybe they have a better payout model. It doesn't matter. Like it doesn't matter at all. There is no sustainable, ethical streaming of music. It just is not a thing. So if you look at it like I found out about this through the streaming service that I paid this flat fee for. Mm-hmm. And now because of that, I'm going to go find them out on Bandcamp and like buy their record or buy a t-shirt or buy a poster, or I'm going to go out and like go to like, not everyone needs to use Bandcamp. Go to like, was it Merch Revolver, whatever it is, like buy stuff directly from them, buy it at a show if you're going out shows, but you have to, it sucks because we're asking people that are like, very much heavily critical of this uber capitalistic, cluster that we live in. Be like, how do you solve it? Through capitalism. No, but it's literally the only way to do it. This
Well,
donating,
people want to see. It's funny when you say that.
donating does not work. It doesn't work.
When you think about like doing the research that I did, I was helping a gentleman, Alexander Herbert, wrote a book about punk in the Soviet Union.
Oh, cool. Neat.
And there's not a lot of archival footage about it, and it's really interesting. Like, those guys were not allowed to make money. I repeat, they were not allowed to make money.
Sure.
The government, especially during Khrushchev, who was after Khrushchev? Brezhnev?
Boy, that's
Yeah, that's really
this is why I phone a friend. Yo, where my fallen Parsi folks at?
Because there was a big repression of certain things that they didn't really want to happen, and so you can only do this music in these places, and it was real interesting.
It was Brezhnev, by the way, afterwards. So there you go.
It was interesting to see how these bands were able to even do anything. Like, how do you even get instruments? They were even getting the music from pirate radio signals, or they were still taking it off the UK BBC signals to hear this like new music. So I'm not saying everywhere is going to be as repressive as the Soviet Union was in the 70s and 80s, but early 80s. But I don't know if there's a model where you can say, well, the state will pay for art, because the state paid for art in the 40s with the New Deal.
Canada, there's a certain amount of Canadian artists that have to be played on radio every increment of time, and they have there's grants from the government for Canadian artists to perform. I mean, it's a small curative, but it's
and it's super specific.
It is, but you know what? There's bands. Look at Sloan. They're like an indie band in the U.S., right? But in Canada, like they're like pretty big bands.
I mean, we had friends that we played with in Canada that also came out to the Bay, and we had raised money for them. We did a throw money in the hat thing, and at the end of the night, I was like, "Well, here's what we have," and they laughed. They're like, "Oh no, that's fine." They're like, "We got a stipend to do this from the state." But,
they didn't even want it. That's wow. Okay, yeah.
They were like, "Oh, you keep it," but you can't even get.
I would totally be that magnanimous if I could afford it.
Hey, Conan, it's a very big grant.
Good for them. That sounds great.
Yeah, it was. But not everybody's going to get. You can't give $30,000 to everybody that wants to be in a band.
Oh, sure, because like, what do you do? We're handing out these history's greatest genius grants. Who wants one? Oh, me. All right, great.
Like it's. I don't. I think we have to stop looking at it as you deserve.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, well, when in history of music, you didn't necessarily, the sing for your supper thing comes from a real place.
You don't. There's a. We just finished a record. It'll be out next year. It's a song, and one of the lyrics is, "You don't get what you deserve, you get what you take."
Mm.
And it's. I wish that was not the case, but that's where we're at, man.
It's. I'm like, look, man, if you like the stuff that I do and you want to pay me for it, thank you. I appreciate it. You're going to help me keep the Disney Plus subscriptions.
Yeah.
Star Wars shows. If you don't and you want to listen to it and you dig it, thanks.
Well, and that's like, so for me with Protonic, right? I don't do exclusive content. I do early access. Yeah. $1. Bernie Sanders model. $1 a month. That's it. That's all I got. You can get more, I guess, if you want to, I guess. But like, it's like $1 a month. And that gets you early access to the show. That's it. You don't get anything else. I'm not going to sit here and put on a puppet show. You're not going to get an embroidered doily. Like, none of that stuff. You get early access to the show. That's it. And there's a bunch of people that throw in every month for it because the show is a big part of their lives. Great. That's awesome. And again, does that work for everyone else? No, it doesn't. It barely works for me, frankly. Mm-hmm. But like it's what it is, and that's how I reconcile it. So for me, my whole thing: no ads, no sponsors, no kidding. It's not like people haven't asked. Plenty of people have asked, and I'm like, no, that's not what this show is. Yeah, no puppet show. Maybe I'll put that up when I look. You'll know I'm hard up when I be like $20 a month, free puppet show. That's how you know I'm hard up.
Well, like we'll end on this.
This
sad
podcasting game's gotten tough. I got to do puppet shows now.
I don't know if Lombardo. I think he was gone when Slayer was doing the. Oh no, he was on that last tour.
Yeah.
A lot of bands hate VIP meet and greets.
Yeah,
like a lot of hate. A lot of hate.
I call that the merch table, by the way. You're a VIP if you're at the merch table buying stuff. You're
Aw.
very important to me because you're paying for the gas for us to get to the next place. Very important.
You're a VIP because you're going to be there
Goddamn right
in
I
the
am.
jacket.
I'll be slanging that merch, except for I look like I jumped in a pool with my clothes on. You know,
Yeah,
it'd be great.
in the jacket.
Yeah. You want a sweaty hug? Sure.
It's Arizona in the summer. That's fine.
It's real, man. It's very real.
Look,
VIP
we've
meet and greet,
been talking for 2.5 hours.
We have.
I knew we were going to talk for a long time.
Thanks for having me on. It's been a bit.
Thanks for agreeing to do this.
Yeah. I'm happy to come on for anything that I'm qualified to talk to, which is most topics.
You can catch him at Protonic Reversal. You can also catch him at Movie Night Extravaganza. Wherever you are listening or watching the show, there are links in the description to everywhere you can see and hear Conan Neutron. You'll be on tour this year?
Soon, end of the month. New York, Chicago, Louisville, all around Caterwaull and Minneapolis, which is the 4-day music festival that is happening, and it is awesome. There will be more tour announcements coming up. We're coming back to the West Coast and everything, I think, in the fall. I'm kind of waiting on some stuff to figure out for that.
Are you going to come down to SoCal so you can come hang out?
Yeah. We were just there, but we're coming back. We have there's a split LP with Lung coming out at the hopefully in fall. We'll see. That's kind of one of the things I'm waiting for. But yeah, we're gonna have a bunch of stuff happening. So we're on Songkick. Oh, sweet. Thanks, Goat Monty. Make sure to say hello. Yeah, I'm rarely idle for long. But yeah, there's always all the stuff on the internet, and there's going to be more live shows this summer I can't talk about yet.
There's no way in the world I could.
If you're not paying your Disney Plus subscription, you ain't flying out to Caterwaull. I know that.
Yeah, I'm not paying my Disney. Yeah.
I could watch that Andor. I could fly out to Caterwaull.
Watch that Andor.
What are you gonna pick? Watch that Andor. All right.
And you know what? So the guitar that I have set aside for Conan Neutron, here's a sad story. I'll end on a very sad story.
Oh, that's
that I just found out when I was up north. The guitar that I had, that really nice Silvertone, the guy that gave that to me, Greg Day, the wonderful, amazing luthier Greg Day, had been holding my stuff, and this guy, a homeless fellow, had given me a bunch of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And he gave me a Marshall JCM 800.
I paid for Disney Plus and then some. Get a year of that.
And he gave me that guitar that I toured in. That has special. It's set up special for your tuning, because I'm.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Because we have a. Yeah, that's a high tuning for you. Yeah,
it's very high. I got.
That's funny because it's not just a drop tuning; it's a drop C tuning. But that's only musicians will care about.
Yeah,
but he tunes up for it.
I'm in drop.
He's in drop like Z or something. Drop stupid.
Big thick string. So anyway, I got a special guitar set up. So Jerry apparently. So Greg goes. Oh, he's giving me my guitars back. He goes, oh yeah, Jerry took back that Silvertone. And I was like, oh whatever, that's fine. I was in my head. I'm thinking, I can always set up another guitar.
Yeah.
And he goes, oh, by the way, Jerry died. And I was like, ooh.
That's rough.
Really? He goes, yeah. I said, did he die on the street? He goes, no, he died in a hospital. He goes, his son came by and he asked if I had a bunch of stuff. Jerry was a musician and he played in bands. He was one of the guys that never made it, but was adjacent to a bunch of cats that had made it. He was an interesting man. for whatever reason, he liked me. He was mildly racist. Not towards me, but towards
Oh no, you're one of the good ones. Yeah.
But the voice I do that you guys, that's like Burgess's dad, like that's how Jerry actually talked. And
Wow.
so he would always be like, you playing that amp? You playing that stuff? You playing that stuff? And I hadn't seen him in a while, but
yeah,
we did a song at Bitter Lake called Rat Food, and when we were putting the video together of it, we wanted to get the encampment because that was my inspiration for the
sure.
song.
Yeah, you see it every day, right? I mean, yeah.
My neighbors. And Jerry had he had a home at one point. I knew him as a man that had a home and stuff, and he lost everything, and then he lived in his car right outside of the studio. And so we did it in 3 parts because we were interviewing people, and we played the music like really, really faintly in the background, and we just kind of let people talk about certain issues in living in an encampment. And Jerry kind of bookends the last one. And I saw it the other day, totally showed up randomly on a YouTube thing after I find out that he passed away. So it's up right now. If you guys, there's a clip that we have that I guess people don't give a shit about. It's called Life Inside of a Homeless Encampment, where we actually recently had interviewed some people that lived in the Wood Street encampment, which was where I lived. Right there. Conan can tell you I was right there. and
literally across the street. Yeah.
Literally across the street. Had to deal with a lot of shit. And so at the end of that clip, there's the, click to see more videos so that you can click to see the video. And also, I think if you go to the This Is Revolution page and just type in Rat Food Part 3, you can see the interview with Jerry, and you can see him talk about, how he got to where he is, and how easy it is for us to fall and be in that situation. But
one bad Bandcamp Friday away.
One Bandcamp Friday, and next thing you know, you're sitting there yelling at Jerry had this dog that would always try to bite me in the nuts. But anyway, fucking hated that dog. Thank you, Conan, for hanging out with me.
Thanks
Please
for having me.
check that clip
Always
out,
a pleasure.
guys. Get a chance to. Also, check out Conan's. Don't even listen to his show. Check out his music. It's a lot of fun.
You can do both. It's fine.
You can't. You cannot. And if you find any live footage of me playing with Conan, I'd love to see it.
Yeah, that'd be
I don't
nice.
think there is.
Some pictures, some good pictures, but
Someone said something about Fatso Jetson, and I was like, "Oh, we played with Fatso Jetson in
Sure did.
Highland Park." Yeah, because Conan's
It's a good
famous.
time. Played with the Unwound folks too, but it wasn't Unwound. It was
We did play with the
Nocturnal
Unwound
Habits.
folks.
But they played like 3 Unwound songs, which was a pleasant surprise. It was
Oh
great.
man, you want to see fucking 45-year-old white people cry?
And JB. Look, the man played an Unwound tribute band. He'd be the first one to.
And
cop to that.
JB's been on the show before. JB is Conan's colored drummer. Conan is the Paul Simon of alternative music.
Damn. That's a harsh joke, man. Wow. Jesus Christ. We're not on air yet, right?
We're Graceland. Conan's new record is called "See, Anti-Racism Works for Everybody." No.
Just don't call me Al.
Just don't call me Al. Just don't call me not anti-racist.
That's right. You're one of the good ones, Jason.
Conan pulls into town with 2 black people in the band. They're like, "Oh man, these guys are gonna be serious." He's got 2 of them. They're both really look like they both work out.
Remember that chick that kept yelling Wakanda forever? And I was like, yeah, man. It's a great movie. The thought never occurred to me. Like, oh,
Was that in Arizona?
that was Arizona. Yeah.
Oh, gotta love Arizona. Fuck. Conan, thank you.
Thank you.
We are out.
Back when Russia was the Union of Soviet Social Republics, and they'd say, "Oh, but aren't you so glad that you're in America?" I said, "Well, I know a lot of Russian filmmakers, and they have a lot more freedom than I have. All they have to do is be careful about criticizing the government."